Hey family, welcome back to my video. Today we will see, what if Harry Potter was the Hellfire Devil Slayer? Before we start, here is my official Patreon. Please join it because there are many stuffs that I can't share here because of community guidelines. But on my Patreon page, you will get adult Harry stories, Naruto, and Deca 2. Also the quick access for other parts of my story which might take time on YouTube. Also there are many stuffs you will get here. Please consider joining my Patreon. Link in the description. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the original author of this story for granting us permission to use it in our YouTube video. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. The author's creation and the original story's link in the descriptions. Please do check that first. Now enjoy the video. Avada Kedavra. Those were the words that Voldemort, self-proclaimed Dark Lord and all-around hypocrite and douchebag, shouted as a bright green spell shot from the tip of his wand, charging straight towards a crib which held a raven-haired baby boy. Hadrian James Potter, son of Lily and James Potter. As the bright green spell, known to the wizarding world as the Killing Curse, crashed into Hadrian, the self-proclaimed Dark Lord was unable to react due to the shock as his curse, the Killing Curse, a curse that has killed every living creature it struck, bounced off of Hadrian's body and made its way back to its caster. A scream ripped from Voldemort's mouth as his soul was torn from his body, leaving his once powerful body nothing more than ash. Voldemort stared at where his body once was, his expression showing his disbelief. As realization hit the self-proclaimed Dark Lord, his disbelief was replaced by rage. How could this pathetic child defeat me? I will make him pay. I will kill everyone he loves. Voldemort raged in his mind before his spirit turned around and flew off, leaving behind an unconscious baby with a small lightning bolt cut on his forehead. As the minutes passed, the sounds of panting and the stomping of footsteps echoed through the home. "Harry!" A female voice called out before the footsteps made its way upstairs. As the footsteps made their way towards the room where Hadrian lay unconscious, a beautiful woman with red hair entered through the doorway as she looked around, searching for the raven-haired baby with fear in her emerald green eyes. This woman is Lily Potter, mother to Hadrian Potter. As the mother quickly picks up her son, a handsome black-haired man enters the room, wand in hand. This man is James Potter, the father of Hadrian Potter. Looking around, James let out a sigh of relief as he saw nothing that could harm either his wife or his son. Lowering his wand, James turned to his wife and smiled as she cooed at their sleeping child, happy that he was still alive despite the blood dripping down his forehead. "Don't worry, honey. He is alive," James says, pulling both his wife and son into a comforting hug. "Yes, he is," a voice spoke, causing both James and Lily to turn and see an elderly man with a massive white beard standing at the entrance to the nursery room. This man is Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts and leader of the Light. "Headmaster," both Lily and James greeted, nodding to their old headmaster. Smiling at the couple, Albus shook his head in amusement. "Please, you two, call me Albus. I would like to think that we are close enough to refer to each other by our names," Albus says warmly. Both Potters smile at their old headmaster and nod their heads in response. "I am glad to see that young Harry is safe," the old man says as he looks down at the sleeping boy who laid in his mother's arm, sound asleep. Looking down at his child, James narrowed his eyes as he looked around. "Where is Peter?" James growled, causing Albus to look at his ex-student in surprise. "Peter? What did young Pettigrew do?" Albus Dumbledore asks with a confused expression on his face. "After you made Sirius our secret keeper, we eventually decided to use Sirius as bait, with his express permission of course, and make Peter our secret keeper," Lily answers, still looking down at Hadrian, rocking him slightly as she refuses to move her gaze away from her sleeping son. Eyes widening in shock, Albus nodded in understanding and notes to himself to make sure that the Aurors don't arrest Sirius Black. And so, grasping his wand, Albus raises his wand into the air, the tip of the wand glowing white. Expecto Patronum, Dumbledore casted, summoning a beautiful white phoenix that shot out of the headmaster's wand and circled around the room, before finally perching itself on Albus' shoulder. Smiling at his Patronus, Albus spoke, go to Madame Bones and inform her that Sirius Black was not the Potter's secret keeper, but was in fact Peter Pettigrew, who had in fact betrayed them. Without any hesitation, the Phoenix Patronus flapped its wings and took off, flying off into the distance towards the location of Amelia Bones. Turning his attention back to his ex-students, Dumbledore blinked as he saw the both of them, sitting on the ground with their attention solely on Hadrian. A smile made its way onto Albus' face as he saw their love for their child. The love of a parent. One of the things that remind me of the beauty of this dark world, Albus thought to himself, his mind going through memories of the pain and suffering that was caused by the Dark Lord known as Voldemort. Break! Voldemort is still alive? Those were the words that came out of Lily Potter's mouth as she stared at her old headmaster with disbelief on her face. Currently holding both the Dark Lord's robe and wand in hand, Albus nodded his head solemnly as both parents sat on the couch, Hadrian in James' arm, while the headmaster sat on a chair. "How certain of this are you?" James asks, worried prominent in his eyes. Sighing to himself, Albus turns to the side where his familiar, a beautiful orange phoenix known as Fawkes, was located, watching the three with sadness in his eyes. "I would be uncertain if I didn't have Fawkes." One of the things that are not known about phoenixes is that they can sense the departure of living beings, no matter whether they are dark or light. This falls under their well-known titles as beings of rebirth. With my bond of Fawkes, I am able to know what he allows me to know, and thus I am aware that Voldemort has yet to depart this world, Albus answers, his hand tightening around Voldemort's wand. The temptation to snap, it was overwhelming to the old man. "Then what do we do?" Lily asks, worried. This causes a sigh to escape Albus' lips. With Voldemort gone, the odds of Death Eaters wanting revenge for their fallen master would be like saying ice melts in the heat. "We will have to have you three hide under some powerful wards as the heat dies down, but the wards will stop you three from leaving your location of choice until they lose their power," Albus answers calmly. Both Lily and James looked intrigued by this. Mostly Lily, as she found herself fascinated by any type of magic. "Really? What will we need to place the ward?" Lily asked, curious, smiling slightly at the curiosity of the young red-haired woman. Dumbledore knew it best to answer the mother's question, otherwise she would never leave him be. "To do this, we would need a location of the user's choice, which would be you three, and then bond your magic to the ward, which will allow you three to stay within the wards until a set amount of time. Where the wards lose their power by themselves," Dumbledore answers. This causes a frown to form on Lily's face as she discreetly looks at her son. "But headmaster, Harry is still just a baby. His magical core has yet to form," Lily asks, worried for her son. This causes a chuckle to escape Albus' lips. "You need not worry. As you are the parents, your magical cores will have a connection to young Harry, allowing him to remain protected within the wards," the headmaster of Hogwarts answers. Lily let out a sigh of relief at the old man's answer. "Out of curiosity, what would cause that connection to be disrupted?" James asked, curious. "The very few ways that would stop young Harry from being connected to you both would either be a lack of a magical core, which young Harry does indeed have, the distance between parent and child, a bad relationship between parent and child, which has sadly happened before, and if the mother is pregnant," Albus answers. As the headmaster finished answering, he noted that Lily had gone pale, causing a frown to form on his face. "Are you all right, my dear?" YEA I. James notices this and turns to look at his wife, immediately realizing that she had gone pale. "Honey, what's wrong?" James asks, placing his unoccupied arm around his wife. Confused as to the red-haired woman's reaction, it didn't take long for the headmaster to notice that Lily had her hand on top of her stomach as her eyes were blank as she was consumed by her thoughts. "You're pregnant," Albus blurted out in surprise. This snaps Lily out of her state while James gaps in shock. "Why you're pregnant?" James couldn't help but ask in surprise. Remaining silent, Lily slowly nodded her head in confirmation. The Lord of the Potter family nearly jumped in joy and happiness before realization dawned on him. With a baby on the way, both his and Lily's magical core will be connecting to their newest family member, which will cause Hadrian's magic core to have a lessened connection to theirs, meaning that the ward will not work for him until the bond between their newest member is complete. "What do we do?" James asks, turning his attention to the leader of light. If he were to be honest, Albus was stumped. There were only two options that he could think of. The first is that due to the fact that the ward will only allow the people inside to leave its barriers when it falls, which is a minimum of 3 years with the max being as long as the caster wishes with the people inside powering it. This in turn leaves only two options. The first being that Lily and James Potter hide under slightly stronger wards with their son, but in turn possibly endangering them and their new family member without its guaranteed safety. And if Albus were to be honest, we would gladly cast another Fidelius charm. If he had enough magic to do so. One of the downsides to the Fidelis charm is that it was an incredibly magic-costing spell, which still has left Albus Dumbledore himself recovering from its effects, even after several months. Hey, he may be one of the most powerful magic users alive, but he was still human. Then there is the second option, placing both Lily, James, and their newest family member under the wards while Albus places Hadrian with someone else, like Sirius Black, but at the cost of the parents losing 3 years of their son's life. There are only two options I can give you. The first is that I place all 3 of you and your newest member under powerful wards, but it cannot guarantee your safety. Or I can have you both continue with the original plan and hide under the ward, but this in turn will mean that young Harry will be placed elsewhere for the next 3 years until the ward loses its power, Albus answers. Immediately, the second idea was declined quite vocally. There is no way in Merlin's bushy beard that I would ever leave my son alone for 3 years. Lily states vehemently, with James nodding his head in agreement. Happy that both parents were unwilling to leave their son alone, Albus also knew that the second option was the best, as it would guarantee the protection of both adult Potters and their newest member, while Hadrian would be placed in safe hands. I understand what you are saying, my dear, but the Death Eaters are guaranteed want revenge, thus endangering all of your lives and that of your unborn child, Dumbledore says softly, knowing that if things were perfect, Voldemort would have never become a Dark Lord. Lily frowned as she looked down, her beautiful emerald green eyes glistening with unshed tears, worried for both her son, an unborn child, and her husband. 3 years. That is the shortest I can make the ward last. Just 3 years, and you all will be back together, Albus says softly, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder. Lily looked up at her old headmaster and turned to look at her husband. With a deep sigh, James knew that the look his wife was giving him was her way of giving him the choice in the matter. It had to be this choice that Lily couldn't make James internally cursed, hating the fact that he had to be the one to choose. Taking a deep breath, James looks at Dumbledore in the eye, his expression serious. If we hide under the ward, where would Harry stay? James asks. He was many things, but James loved his wife and son and his unborn child. With the risk of Death Eaters looming above his family, James wanted his family to be as safe as possible. He will be either with Sirius or with Frank and Alice and their son, Neville, Albus answers firmly. Nodding his head in understanding, James turns to his wife. I think we should take the headmaster's suggestion and hide under the ward, James suggests to his wife. If we do that, we won't see Harry for 3 years. We won't hear his first words, won't see him walk for the first time. We will miss out on all of that, Lily says, her voice breaking as tears begin to form in her eyes. James felt a lump form in his throat. The very thought of missing his first child's most important moments hurt, but if it meant that his family would be safe, that price was worth it. I know, but we will see him again, James says, comforting his wife. As she looked in her husband's eyes, Lily let out a sob as she looked down at her lap. She knew that he was right, but she couldn't help but be so angry at him. She also knew that she couldn't blame him either. She couldn't make the choice, and she gave him the permission to choose. Well, will he be safe? Lily asks, turning her attention to her old headmaster. Smiling slightly at their protectiveness, Albus nodded his head. I will protect him with my life, the old man states firmly. Swallowing the vomit that threatened to escape her mouth, Lily hesitantly nodded her head and turned to James, focusing on the baby in his arms. Without word, Lily grabbed Hadrian and practically ripped him out of James' arms, much to the man's shock. Don't worry, baby. We will see each other again. Just 3 years. 3 years, baby, and we will be a family again, Lily says, placing her lips onto her son's forehead. James smiled at his wife and son before turning to Albus. "How long do we have until you put up the ward?" James asks, slightly fearful. Noticing this, Albus knew that the couple needed time to spend with their eldest child before being separate for the 3 years. "A week. I can give you a week before the Death Eaters are likely to attack you," Albus answers softly. Nodding his head, James turned his attention back onto his wife and child, his heart clenched tightly in his chest at the thought of not seeing his son for the next 3 years. Time skip. It has been a few days since the Potters have gone under the ward, protecting them for the next 3 years until it naturally loses its strength. Already things have been going bad. First, the Ministry illegally sent Sirius to Azkaban, which would take at least a month to get him out of due to politics, and Frank and Alice Longbottom are in a coma while Neville was under his grandmother's care. Damn Crouch, and ignoring protocol, Albus Dumbledore internally cursed as he sat at his desk in the headmaster's office. Abo! The sound of cooing brought the old man out of his thoughts, causing Albus to turn to see little Hadrian, sitting in his rocking chair and sucking on his fist. Smiling at the baby boy, Albus stood up from his chair and made his way towards Hadrian, squatting beside the rocking chair. "Look who's awake. Have a nice nap, Harry?" Albus asks, picking Hadrian up from his rocking chair and into his arms. Babbling in response, Hadrian looks up at Albus with curiosity in his eyes, his fist still in his mouth. "Oh, isn't that adorable?" A voice filled with power echoed throughout the room, causing Dumbledore to tense up, flicking his arm and having the Elder Wand shoot into his hand, with Hadrian in his other arm. "Who are you? What do you want?" Albus demanded, narrowing his eyes as he looked around the office. "I want many things, but what I want now is that boy. Hand him over, and I won't be tempted to kill you," the voice answered. Feeling shivers run down his spine, Albus shook his head, eyes filled with both fear and defiance. "You will have to kill me before I let you take Hadrian," Dumbledore snarled, raising his arm, the Elder Wand glowing brightly as magic coursed through it. "Hadrian, so that is his name. So be it," the voice responded. Before Albus could react, a hand grabbed his throat, lifting him up into the air. Standing before Albus was a beautiful woman with tan skin, beautiful long black hair that cascaded down to her back, and a buxom body that would make supermodels jealous. But what caused Albus to pale were the horns protruding from her head, the wings on her back, and the tail swinging behind her as her black eyes stared into Albus' soul. "You are brave for a human, but I will have what I came for," she spoke, her tail slowly moving towards Hadrian, and despite holding the baby as best as he could, the woman's tail was eventually able to pull Hadrian out of his grasp and to the woman. "It is rare for humans to be so protective even when their lives are at stake. So I will show my respect by not killing you," the woman states. Smash! Albus could only recall the cries of Hadrian as he was flung across the office, crashing into one of his many bookshelves and landing roughly onto the floor. With pain consuming his mind, Albus was barely able to move as he watched the woman hold on to Hadrian before flying out of the office and into the night sky. Reaching out towards the retreating figure of the woman, tears began to slide down Albus' face as he watched Hadrian disappear with the woman. "No," Albus whispered before finally losing consciousness. Break! Lilith, the Hellfire demoness of destruction, was bored. Flying across the night sky, the beautiful black-haired woman found herself in another dimension in the hope of finding something that would help her to achieve her goal. Finding a mate. After thousands of years of being alive, Lilith found herself desiring someone to be with, someone to have, someone to hold. Unlike the rest of her race, who would rather exterminate all humans for just existing, Lilith, on the other hand, cared little about the humans, as in her eyes they were nothing more than pests that typically left her alone, and so she did the same. As she continued to fly through the sky, Lilith came to a stop. The dark-haired beauty found her magic pulsing, pulling her towards a large castle off in the distance. Frowning slightly at the odd behavior of her magic, the buxom demoness flew towards the castle and found herself staring inside the room at the top of a tower. Inside was an old man with odd-colored robes, holding a small black-haired baby boy. As she looked down at the baby boy, Lilith found her magic pulse, as if reacting to his presence. Realization dawned on Lilith as she realized what the reason for her magic's reaction was. The boy was compatible with Devil Slayer magic. Finally, after all these years, her goal was now before her. The baby boy would learn her magic and one day become her mate. And so, with her future mate before her, Lilith knew that he would never grow around such weak humans, as the old man was as strong as a common Earthland mage. Nothing too special. Watching the baby coo, Lilith felt a smile grow on her face. "Oh, isn't that adorable?" Lilith spoke, causing the old man to look around, tense. "Oh yes, he will be mine," Lilith thought, looking closely at the black-haired baby. Break. Lilith expected many things, but what she did not expect was that she would kidnap a baby to train him to one day be her mate. If she were to be honest, it sounds like it would be fun. With her future mate in her arms, Lilith flew through the sky above the lands of Earthland, where she was first summoned and where most demons went to. With Hadrian in her arms, Lilith eventually landed near an active volcano where a small home made out of black stone was located. Letting out a relieved sigh, Lilith opened the door to her home and entered, the door closing behind her. Looking down at Hadrian Potter, a last name that confused Lilith when she had read that old man's mind, the demoness noted the squirming of the baby, sweat beginning to form on his body as the heat began to bother him. Smiling in amusement, Lilith placed her finger in her mouth and lightly bit down, her sharp teeth piercing her finger and drawing blood. Pulling her finger away from her mouth, Lilith began to concentrate magic into her finger and summon beautiful blue flames that began to dance around the blood. Smiling down at the baby boy, Lilith placed her finger into Hadrian's mouth and watched as the raven-haired boy began to suckle on her finger, swallowing the blood and the magic that she had imbued her blood with. Slowly, Hadrian went limp as his body went into a magical induced coma to allow his body to adapt to the magic that had now been introduced to his body. Smiling at her future mate, Lilith had stripped herself of clothing, freeing her curvy form from its constraint of clothes. Making her way towards her room, the demoness had begun to remove Hadrian of his clothes as she reached her bed, laying on her back with her future mate's head between her breasts. "Don't worry, my love. In a matter of time, you shall enjoy the pleasures of my body," Lilith whispered in Hadrian's ear before placing a kiss onto his lips, soon allowing herself to fall asleep with her future mate in her arms. It didn't. Okay, I doubt I need to point it out, but I will do it anyway. I do not condone Lilith's actions. It is freaked, but what you must understand is that Lilith is a demon. She doesn't give a crap about the opinions of others. In her eyes, Hadrian is compatible for Devil Slayer magic, and thus she will make him be her future mate. It's freaked, but she is a demon. Remember that. The Boy and the Demoness. Chapter 1. The Boy and the Demoness. Age 2. It's been a year since Lilith had taken Hadrian from his home dimension and brought the little Potter to Earthland. And if Lilith were to be honest, she enjoyed the baby boy's company. Aside from changing his diapers, the little boy was a joy to be around. He drank milk directly from Lilith's breast, who enjoyed the experience. But at moments, for a split second, Lilith noticed the flicker of blue flames around Hadrian's body. Smiling to herself, Lilith would spend days at a time being around the baby boy, watching him as he crawled around with a silly smile on his face, the heat of the nearby volcano no longer bothering him. Good. His body is processing the Slayer magic within him, Lilith thought to herself as she sat on the couch, enjoying the baby's babbling. Age 3. Already Hadrian was starting to bring forth his magic in the form of blue fire, something that made Lilith proud to no end. With the signs of his Devil Slayer magic beginning to grow, Lilith watched as the little Potter waddled around, struggling to stand on his 2 feet as he used nearby objects to help himself stay upright. Smiling at the babbling baby, Lilith bent down and picked him up by the armpits, bringing him up to her breasts where the little Potter laid his head on. Giggling at her future mate's action, Lilith moved towards a nearby window and looked out, watching the volcano as it continued to give off heat, occasional spots of lava shooting out of the volcano and sliding down the side. Looking down, Lilith noted the odd look on Hadrian's face as he stared at the lava that slid down the side of the volcano. "That's lava. It comes out of the volcano," Lilith says, kissing Hadrian on the forehead. Looking up at the only person he knew, Hadrian babbled as he placed his hands on top of Lilith's breasts. Bava, the little potter, spoke, causing Lilith to coo and smash her breasts into Hadrian's face. Oh, you said lava. That is so adorable, Lilith gushed as she hugged Hadrian tightly. Giggling at Lilith, Hadrian smiled as his entire body was soon engulfed in bright blue flames. Squeaking in surprise, Lilith stood up and made sure that Hadrian wouldn't burn anything inside the house. Hey, be careful. The walls and the house may be fireproof, but it doesn't mean that the inside is, Lilith exclaimed. Looking up at Lilith, Hadrian's lip began to tremble as tears began to form in the corner of his eyes. Realizing that she had scared her mate, Lilith pulled the young potter into a hug as she stroked his hair, causing Hadrian to rest his head on her. Don't worry, I'm not angry at you, but you should know to be careful when you use your magic. Okay? Lilith asks, looking down at Hadrian. Nodding his head, the little potter held tightly onto the demoness, enjoying the softness of her breast. Chuckling at the little boy's attachment to her breasts, Lilith held Hadrian as she sat back down, watching as lava slid down the volcano. Age 4. Narrowing his eyes, Hadrian growled as arm was engulfed in bright blue flames. Standing outside his home, Hadrian took a deep breath as he stood before a large boulder that had broken off from the volcano and tumbled down near their house. Hellfire demon, destruction fist, Hadrian roared, smashing his fist into the boulder. Boom! The boulder explodes from the impact, remains of the boulder flying everywhere as Hadrian remains frozen, breathing heavily with his arm out. Very impressive, a voice calls out, eliciting a smile from Hadrian. Turning around, the young potter's eyes soften when he sees Lilith standing before him, currently in a bathrobe that showed off a dangerous amount of cleavage. What can I say? I try to impress, Hadrian says, spreading his arms out. Giggling into her hand, Lilith smiled as she walked towards the young potter. That may be, but while you have power and the magic required, you must also learn the many spells that you will one day need to fight, and you know what that requires, Lilith says with a knowing smile. Groaning in frustration, Hadrian kicks a small bit of the remains of the boulder in frustration. Study, Hadrian says in annoyance. In response, Lilith merely giggles. Break, do you understand now? Lilith asks as she stands before Hadrian, who is currently in his seat with a desk in front of him and a notebook and pen on the desk. The young potter looked up at Lilith with a blank expression on his face. No, Hadrian answers. Sighing slightly, Lilith rubs her forehead and takes a deep breath. Alright, simply put, there are two different types of Devil Slayer magic. The most common and well-known type is in fact the weakest. Commonly known for its black markings, this type of Devil Slayer magic is the result of those using the curse of Aetherius. I hope you know what the Aetherius are, Lilith asks with a raised eyebrow. The Aetherius are demons created by the dark wizard, Zerif. These demons are known to the demons of purgatory such as yourself as the Dash. Fake demons, Lilith says, cutting Hadrian's explanation off. Yes, the Aetherius are known as the fake demons as they are made by a human. The curse the Aetherius uses is weak compared to the curse we demons use. As a result, the Devil Slayer magic from the curse of the Aetherius is far weaker and limited compared to the other type. In fact, the Aetherius Devil Slayers are just knockoff Dragon Slayers, as they also eat their element, which you cannot do, Lilith admitted, scratching her chin in thought. Anyway, now there is the more powerful type of Devil Slayer magic. This is the one you use. The demons of purgatory would know you as a true Devil Slayer, as not only do you use our curse, but you also gain a demon form. While the Aetherius Devil Slayer can also gain a demon form, the use of their curse will in fact make the wielder go insane, making them rash and causing them to create poor decisions. One thing about true Devil Slayers is that they are the rarest of the three Slayers. Due to this, not much is known about them, except of course God Slayers trained by gods and dragons. Slayers trained by dragons follow traditions that all Slayers follow, Lilith explained. Traditions? Hadrian asks, confused. Smiling at the young boy, Lilith began to place books on Hadrian's desk. One thing about all Slayers that they have in common is mate markings. Mate marking is where a Slayer marks their mate for all Slayers to know. As a result, all Slayers and even demons, gods, and dragons know to stay away or at least not pursue that mate romantically. Of course, there are the rare exceptions where the Slayer has multiple mates. But anyway, the only Slayers that can have mate marking are the Aetherius Devil Slayers, due to their curse affecting their mentality and behavior, Lilith answers calmly. As a result, many Aetherius Devil Slayers became ineffective after a certain period of time. Of course, this was before the Aetherius wiped them out in fear of their power. So besides the power, what other differences are there between Aetherius Devil Slayers and my type? Hadrian asks, curious. The difference between Aetherius Devil Slayers and true Devil Slayers is that, like a demon of purgatory, you will grow stronger just by being around your element, which means that any fire magic directed at you will in fact strengthen you. Unlike Dragon Slayers, you will not need to eat your element. Another thing is that unlike Aetherius Devil Slayers, your senses will be enhanced, Lilith answers. Blinking in surprise, Hadrian leans forward, interested in what he could gain. Like what? Hadrian asks, curious. Smiling down at her future mate, Lilith bends down towards Hadrian, giving the young potter a perfect view of her cleavage. One interesting fact about Slayers is that they gain properties of the creatures they kill. For their senses, Dragon Slayer senses such as smell, hearing, sight, taste, and touch are dialed up to 11. For God Slayers, they gain the ability to sense the use of their element within a certain vicinity and those in their element. This in turn makes it basically impossible for someone of the same element or in their element to sneak up on the God Slayer, due to that they are just as dangerous as Devil and Dragon Slayers. And for true Devil Slayers, they gain the ability to sense the magical energy of everyone within their vicinity, making it nearly impossible to sneak up on them, and it allows you to sense any demonic blood or energy within a person, which in turn allows you to sense what type of magic the individual uses as it is connected to their magical energy. No demon will be able to trick you through disguises. Lilith smiles coyly at the young potter. Without another word, Lilith straightens up and pats Hadrian on the head, momentarily freezing as she feels a bump on his head. Age 5. Hey, Lilith. Hadrian turns towards the woman who had raised him, looking up at her with a questioning gaze. Now 5 years old, Hadrian had small black horns protruding from his head. His scara had gained black cracks that had slowly begun to grow over time, slowly consuming the white of his eyes. Yes, Hadrian? Lilith asks, looking down at the young potter. Currently located in a village, both Hadrian and Lilith looked around, with Lilith in her human form. With the majority of men drooling over Lilith's figure and the jealous glares from the women, nobody really noticed the small horns and the eyes of the young true Devil Slayer. Are we like them? Hadrian asks, pointing to a couple holding their child as they sat near a river, smiling as the child splashed around, laughing happily. Smiling down at the young boy, Lilith shook her head. Not exactly. We are more like that man and woman, the demoness answers, gesturing to the parents who held each other as they watched. Tilting his head, Hadrian felt confused as to how he and Lilith were like the man and woman. Why them? Hadrian asked, curious. Because one day we will have a child of our own. Don't you want to be a daddy? Lilith asks as she lifts Hadrian up into her arms. This caused the young boy to pause. A daddy? He had never thought about having one, let alone being one. I don't know, Hadrian answers, frowning slightly. Smiling at her future mate, Lilith kisses Hadrian on the forehead, and the both of them soon leave the village, returning home near the active volcano. Back on Earth. What do you mean my son was kidnapped? The voice of Lily Potter echoed through the halls of Hogwarts. Currently located in the headmaster's office, Albus Dumbledore let out a tired sigh as he looked at the couple before him, with two small babies in their arms. Born only a few minutes apart with red hair, the Potter couple gave birth to twins, Violet Potter and Alex Potter both. Twins had the same hair as their mother, but Alex has hazel brown eyes and Violet has emerald green. Immediately after the wards lost its power, the Potter couple immediately left to go see Dumbledore to retrieve their son, only for the news of his kidnapping to reach their eyes. It is as I said. After you both went into hiding, I intended for Hadrian to be placed with Sirius. The only problem was that Sirius was illegally imprisoned by Barty Crouch Sr., who sent Sirius straight to Azkaban without a trial. After that, I had planned to place Hadrian with the Longbottoms, only for Hoth, Alice, and Frank to be tortured to insanity, resulting in young Neville to be placed with his grandmother. Albus answers, looking down in shame at failing both parents. Then how was Hadrian, our son, Alex and Violet's older brother, kidnapped? James asks with a worried expression on his face. Sighing slightly, Albus pulled out his wand and placed the tip at the side of his head. Closing his eyes in concentration, Albus slowly moved the wand away as pulled a glowing string from his head. Realizing what was going on, both Lily and James walked towards the pensive as Albus places the string into the bowl. I am truly sorry. I had tried my best to locate young Harry to no avail. I hope you can forgive me, Albus says just as both Lily and James enter the pensive, both Alex and Violet sitting on their parents' chair as they look around with childlike curiosity. Back in Earthland, Hellfire Demon, Devastation Talon. Hadrian roared as he slammed his leg into an incoming boulder that had been launched from the volcano. Quickly jumped to the side, Hadrian snarled as he brought his fist back as another boulder was falling towards him. Hellfire Demon, Destruction Fist. Hadrian screamed as he punched the boulder, destroying it on impact. Taking a deep breath, Hadrian looked up at the volcano, glaring at it with anger. This is starting to get annoying, the young Devil Slayer thought to himself. Demon Slayer Secret Arts. Annihilation Surge, Hadrian yelled as bright blue flames engulfed both of Hadrian's arms, bringing both arms to his chest. Hadrian swung them outwards in a single motion, sending a wave of fire, consuming all the boulders falling down. As the flames began to dissipate, Hadrian let out a breath as he fell to his knees, tired from the large use of magic. Tilting his head slightly, Hadrian was able to somewhat sense a familiar demonic energy making its way towards him. I must say, I am impressed with your progress. You are able to use the secret arts despite the already large amount of spells that have been used, Lilith says with an impressed tone. Chuckling slightly, Hadrian attempted to stand up, only for his legs to lose strength and fall down into the arms of Lilith, who had caught him. I strive to impress, the young potter mumbled as his eyes slowly began to close, exhausted from his large use of magic. Hey, didn't. I'm going to make one thing clear. Magic and curse may be two different things, as magic is not as dark or evil as curse. But I will still call curse magic, as it is just a darker version of magic, just powered by dark emotions, and it keeps things simple. Age 6, letting out a pained yell. Hadrian felt his arm break as he landed on it with a loud crack. Standing above the young boy, Lilith looked down at the young potter, arms crossed. I know you can do better than that. Get up, Lilith ordered with a blank expression on her face. Growling in anger, Hadrian opened his eyes, revealing glowing emerald green eyes. The sclera of his eyes now fully black, consumed by the cracks that were once visible in the white of his eyes. Slowly getting up to his feet, Hadrian felt his arms surge with pain, causing him to let out a pained yell. Sighing to herself, Lilith shook her head and waited, knowing that he needed a few moments. Slowly but surely, Hadrian felt his demonic regeneration kick in, slowly healing his broken bone. That's one of the things we demons have over the gods and dragons. We have better healing, Lilith says with a smug grin. But do not forget that healing requires magic. That means you are not invincible, the demoness warns with narrowed eyes. Taking a deep breath, Hadrian nodded his head and looked up at Lilith with a determined gaze. With black horns protruding from his head that could be grasped by both hands, Hadrian cracked his neck and bent his knees slightly, ready to lunge at the demoness. Moments passed, and Hadrian charged at Lilith, dark blue fire engulfing his arm as he swung forward. Hellfire Demon, Destruction Fist, Hadrian roared as he struck, hitting Lilith in the face. A few moments passed, and the young Devil Slayer blinked. She had not moved an inch, completely unaffected by his attack. Chuckling to herself, Lilith grabbed Hadrian's wrist and twisted. Crack, letting out a scream of pain. Hadrian watched as dark purple flames covered Lilith's fist as she pulled her arm back. This is how you do it, Hellfire Demon. Destruction Fist, Lilith yelled out, striking Hadrian in the gut, sending the young potter flying back. Landing on the stone, Hadrian gasped as he coughed up blood, his vision blurry as he began to focus his magic on healing the damage that Lilith had done. With what seemed to be hours, but was mere minutes, The pain that consumed Hadrian's entire being slowly began to fade, with only exhaustion and soreness replacing it. I am impressed. That type of healing should have knocked you out, and yet here you are, awake. If only barely, Lilith says, walking towards Hadrian. Breathing heavily, Hadrian wobbled as his vision began to blur, a headache beginning to form as he struggled to stand on his own two legs. As his strength began to leave him, Lilith moved forward, catching the young potter just as his legs lost the strength to carry him. Rest, my love. You have done well, Lilith whispered into Hadrian's ear as his eyes slowly began to close and he fell into the warm embrace of sleep. Break. Slowly opening his eyes, Hadrian let out a yawn as he attempted to sit up, only for a pair of arms to stop him from moving any further. Chuckling slightly, Hadrian looked up to see the sleeping form of Lilith, nude and pressing her soft, warm body against his equally naked body. Relaxing in the demoness embrace, Hadrian wrapped his arm around Lilith's waist and pulled her closer to him. Feeling Lilith's large breasts press against his chest, Hadrian looked at Lilith's sleeping face. The demoness was beautiful, but when asleep she seemed radiant, something out of a dream. As Hadrian continued to look at the woman who cared for him for nearly all of his life, Hadrian paused as he felt something off. Pulling his arm back, Hadrian blinked as he looked down at his hand, which had begun to change as the end of his fingers began to show signs of claws, the end of his fingers becoming pointed as they lengthened slightly. Didn't know I would get claws, the young potter thought to himself in surprise as he turned his hand around, inspecting the change. Knowing that he would get to spend time to test the results of his continued transformation, Hadrian placed his arm back around the demoness waist, relaxing into her embrace once more. Age 7. Taking a deep breath, Hadrian wiped his forehead, removing the sweat that drenched his face. Currently in the middle of a forest, far from his home and the heat of the volcano, Hadrian felt weakened as he no longer had the power boost from the increased heat and distance toward a large fire source. Not too far from the young devil slayer, Lilith watched with a smile as Hadrian dropped down and began to perform push-ups, counting every time he performed a push-up. It seems I was right with keeping Harry near that volcano during his first years in training, Lilith thought to herself, recalling how the continuous absorption of magic due to the vicinity of a large fire source resulted in a larger magical container for the young boy, while also resulting in excess magic being pushed throughout his body, further enhancing his strength and physical abilities. And now she stood, watching as Hadrian trained without the boost of his element being nearby, weakening the young boy as a result. But certainly not weak, the demoness thought to herself, looking at the muscles that had begun to form on Hadrian's torso and arms, a result of gaining large amounts of magic constantly. Looking closely at the young boy, Lilith noted the change in Hadrian ever since he became a devil slayer. The first and most notable one was his black horns that protrude from his head. The second was his eyes, no longer white. The scare of the boy's eyes was pitch black, leaving only his pupils and iris unaffected, even if it's a little more prominent as a result. The next was claws that the young devil slayer grew, replacing his fingers with sharp, pointed claws, his entire hand gaining a darker skin tone as a dark bone-like plating formed over it. The last noticeable change was the young potter's feet, which had begun to change, forming into dark talons with the same bone-like plating forming over Hadrian's feet. Smiling at the young boy, Lilith noticed that the young devil slayer's skin had gained a grayer skin tone, something that was hardly noticeable until you looked closely. I wonder what the end of his transformation is going to look like, Lilith wondered. While this was happening, Hadrian turned around, rolling onto his back, and began to perform sit-ups, unaware of the lustful eyes of Lilith. Age 9. 2 years had passed, and Hadrian found himself standing on top of the volcano, looking down at the place he called home. The young baby boy that was once brought here as a human, the young devil slayer, was now in his demon form, with dark gray skin with dark bone-like plates over his body, 5 large clawed talons that were once his feet, and sharp claws. With a deep breath, Hadrian bent his legs and jumped off the edge of the volcano, jumping down the side of the volcano towards his home of 8 years. As the young devil slayer got closer, he noticed a man standing beside Lilith, He had tanned skin and black hair with horns protruding from his head and a tail swinging behind him. Blinking in surprise, Hadrian landed before the two, cracking the ground slightly from the impact. Hello, Hadrian. Good to see you are here," the man says with a smile. This man is Lucifer, twin brother of Lilith and a man who helped train Hadrian when he had truly begun his training. "Lucifer, how are you today?" Hadrian asks with a raised eyebrow. Chuckling slightly, Lucifer turned to Lilith with a smile, silently asking her to answer. "I asked Lucy here to bring you a present for your birthday," Lilith answers with a bright smile. Cocking an eyebrow, Hadrian looks at Lucifer, who was shaking his head with a smile, amused by Lilith's giddiness. Without a word, Lucifer brought his hand out, and in a flash of hot white fire, a sheathed sword emerged. "This is Armageddon. This is the blade I used in my youth, and now it belongs to you," Lucifer says with a smile, handing the sword to Hadrian, who stared at the blade with a gaping mouth, showing his sharp teeth. "Thank you," the young devil slayer stuttered in shock. Lilith smiled brightly at her brother and her future mate's relationship. They get along so well, Lilith thought to herself happily. Back on Earth, within Potter Mansion, Lily Potter could be seen in her room, crying as she held a picture tightly in her hands. This picture was of the last she had seen her eldest son, with Hadrian in her arms as he babbled happily, right before the Potter couple went behind the wards to protect them. "I wish we had never hidden under those stupid wards," Lily cursed internally as she continued to cry. "Mommy!" a small voice hesitantly called, shaking Lily lightly. Quickly realizing who was here, Lily wiped the tears from her eyes and sat up, looking down at her son, who stood at the side of the bed, worry in his hazel brown eyes. Now 5.5 years old, Alex had spent all of his life seeing his mother in her room, crying with a picture in her hands. A picture of his eldest brother, Hadrian, or as he is known in the wizarding world, the boy who lived. "Yes, Alex, is something wrong?" Lily asks, trying to hide the tear marks on her face, but was unable to hide her red eyes. Sighing slightly, Alex offered his hand with a soft smile on his face. "Come, Mommy. Violet wants to go to the pool," Alex says, internally hoping his mother would accept so she would be able to at least be distracted by the fact that her eldest son was missing. With a sad smile on her face, Lily nodded her head and took Alex's hand, getting up from the bed and allowing him to lead her to the backyard where James and Violet were. Seeing his wife, James smiled softly at her and made his way to her. Giving the beautiful redhead a hug, James whispered softly into her ear, allowing Lily to relax in his embrace. "We will find him. I promise," James promised. As the Potter twins watched their parents hug, Alex turned his head slightly to look at his twin. "Any luck?" Alex asks, hopeful. Shaking her head with a sigh, Violet slumps forward. "Nothing. I looked in the library, but I couldn't find anything. Truthfully, I couldn't even understand half of it," Violet grumbles. Alex sighed, knowing that finding their brother would be nearly impossible, if he was alive, that is. "I am sorry, Mom. Dad. We failed you both," twins thought to themselves with their heads down in shame. "Break! Snap! Snap! Snap!" Hadrian let out a sigh as he sat at the front yard, a ball of light blue fire above his claws before it was extinguished with a snap of his claws. Snap! The light blue fire forms above the young devil slayer's claws once more. Snap! Snapping his claws once more, extinguishing the flames. Hadrian stared at the volcano in the distance, patiently waiting for Lilith to arrive. "Hope you weren't waiting long," Lilith says as she sat beside the young devil slayer. Shaking his head, Hadrian turned towards Lilith with a blank expression on his face. "No. So, what did you want me out here for?" Hadrian asked, curious, as he extinguished the flames with a snap of his claws. "It's about Armageddon. I want to use it to create a seal for you," Lilith states. Frowning, Hadrian turns to the demoness, tilting his head slightly. "And why do you want to create a seal?" Hadrian asks, cautiously letting out a sigh. Lilith placed her hands together on her lap. "The reason is that due to your age, you aren't able to go back and forth between your human form and your demon form. Now, this isn't your fault. In fact, it was pretty common for true devil slayers. This is due to your growing powers and strength. The reason for this is because true devil slayers, in terms of raw power, are the weakest of the 3 slayer types. But as a result, devil slayers have easy access to their demon forms, gaining it at an incredibly young age and being able to maintain it indefinitely, boosting their power to close the gap in power between the three Slayers types. If there are any first-generation Slayers, then it is incredibly unlikely that they will be up to your level of power, as I made sure you train like a devil Slayer back in the day would. In fact, for your age, you are certainly more powerful than the Devil Slayers when they were your age, Lilith states. Cocking an eyebrow at that, Hadrian thought it over and hesitantly noted, "Fine, I will let you create a seal. But how would I be able to access my full power afterwards?" Hadrian couldn't help but ask. Lilith giggles and smiles down at the young Devil Slayer with amusement in her eyes. "Oh, that is simple. Just unite the sword with yourself," Lilith answers. Blinking in surprise, Hadrian turned to the demoness with confusion present on his face. "And how am I supposed to do that?" Hadrian asks, cocking an eyebrow. "Oh, that's simple. Stab yourself," Lilith answers. Pause. The young Devil Slayer stared at Lilith, then blinked. Standing up, Hadrian grasped Lilith's head and began checking her over. "Hang on there a second, Lils. I think you might have a couple of loose marbles in there," Hadrian says as he turns Lilith's head to look at the back. "I do not," Lilith whined, swinging her arms around, tears in the corner of her eyes. "Break, how did this happen?" Hadrian thought out loud as he sat on the ground, tied up with rope. Standing in front of Hadrian was Lilith, pouting at him with her cheeks puffed up. "So, are you going to create the seal or not?" Hadrian asks with a raised eyebrow. Lilith narrowed her eyes at the young Devil Slayer, her cheeks puffing up more. The young potter sighed and shook his head, knowing exactly what the demoness wanted. "I am sorry, Lilith. That was mean of me." Hadrian apologizes. Lilith looks at the young potter for a few moments, then smiles brightly at Hadrian, happy that the Devil Slayer apologized. "Now let me freaking go," Hadrian orders. Lilith the pouting demon returns. "Break. All right, ready?" Lilith asks, holding Armageddon in her hands. Nodding his head in response, Hadrian took a deep breath and growled, his body soon engulfed in dark blue flames. Taking in a deep breath, Lilith placed the blade of the sword into the ground, the handle pointed upwards. "Talu markato, unrasalok, taraso. Mingu senu milorak." Lilith began chanting in demonic tongue as slowly Hadrian watched his flames being absorbed into Armageddon. Slowly the sword's blade began to shift to dark blue, dark runes being formed in the center of the blade as it continued to absorb Hadrian's demonic power, sealing it within both the blade and within the young Devil Slayer. With a few final words, Lilith gestured to Hadrian and nodded her head to the sword. Understanding what she wanted, Hadrian grasped the handle of the sword and hissed as his horns began to recede, along with his claws and talons, his skin regaining its original color and the bone-like scales beginning to recede. As the transformation came to an end, Hadrian let out a shuddering sigh as he fell to his knees, drained from the ceiling of his power. Now with slightly tanned skin, Hadrian's scaro was now white. His head lacked the horns that were once there, and his talons were now replaced with feet. The young Devil Slayer appeared human. "It is done," Lilith says as she smiles at Hadrian. "Age 10, just a bit." Further, Hadrian growled as his body was drenched in sweat as a pair of chairs was wrapped around his arms. Attached to those were two large boulders, dragged across the ground as they created massive lines in the dirt with every step Hadrian took. Feeling his body break only for his demonic healing to repair the damage, Hadrian felt his entire body protest his movements as his muscles were torn and healed within seconds. The more the young Devil Slayer healed, the more magic was being consumed to allow Hadrian's healing factor to work. After the last two steps, Hadrian let out a gasp as he fell to his knees as the chains magically released their hold on him. "Are Gasp you gasp happy now?" "Gasp," Hadrian asked as he struggled to breath, nearly wheezing with every breath. From the trees, Lucifer emerged with a smile on his face. "I'm indeed impressed, Harry. Now come on, I'll take you to Lilith. I am certain she would like to help you rest," Lucifer says with a slight chuckle. "Yeah, freak you too." Hadrian cursed the demon, only receiving a laugh from the demon in response. Without a word, Lucifer bent down and picked Hadrian up, throwing the young Devil Slayer over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. "Oh, you are a freaking stupid," Hadrian cursed as he winced at the surge of pain from having Lucifer's shoulder press into his stomach, letting out another amused laugh. Lucifer walked towards his sister's home, occasionally chuckling at Hadrian's curses, knowing that the young boy would be back to normal after he recovered. Break, letting out a content sigh. Hadrian laid in the hot bath, the water soothing his sore muscles as he closed his eyes. "Hey, no falling asleep on me, young man," a voice states, eliciting a chuckle from the young devil slayer. Opening his eyes, Hadrian looks up to see the amused face of Lilith, who was also in the bath, her arms wrapped around his torso as he laid against her. "Why not? You're incredibly soft and firm," Hadrian asked with a raised eyebrow. Giggling at her future mate's bluntness, Lilith leaned her head down and placed her lips against Hadrian's, her tongue entering his mouth, swirling around his tongue. Battling against the demoness tongue for dominance, Hadrian let out a small moan as Lilith wrapped her hand around his stupid, softly stroking it as they kissed. Lust burned in Lilith's eyes as she felt Hadrian grow in her hand. With a smile, Lilith moved her head away from Hadrian's, leaving a strand of saliva attached to their tongues before it soon broke apart from the force of gravity. "You've grown. Looks like it's time," Lilith says with a hint of excitement. Looking up at the beautiful demoness, Hadrian grinned as he knew what the black-haired beauty was referring to, excitement shining in his eyes. "Then let's have a little fun," Hadrian smirks, causing Lilith to bite her lip at his handsome and cute face. "Yes, let's," Lilith responds as she kisses the young devil slayer once more. Time skip. A groan escaped Hadrian as his eyes opened, the sun shining in his eyes, temporarily blinding the young devil slayer. Looking around, the young potter blinked as he noticed that Lilith was not in bed with him. For the young devil slayer, it was an unusual event, and so, throwing off his covers and revealing his nude form, Hadrian grabbed his underwear and some pants and went downstairs to see Lilith sitting in the dining room. "Morning, Lilith. What are you doing up so early?" Hadrian asks with a frown. A sad sigh escaped Lilith as she looked up at Hadrian, eyes widening. Hadrian realized that there was only one thing in this scenario that would make the demoness upset. "It's already begun, hasn't it?" Hadrian asks with a small frown. Nodding her head, Lilith stood up from her chair and made her way towards Hadrian, wrapping her arms around the young devil slayer. "Yes, a rebellion has begun in purgatory, and I need to stop it." Along with Lucifer, Lilith informs Hadrian, causing a sigh to escape the young potter. "How long?" Hadrian asks with a worried expression. "I don't know," Lilith answers honestly. Clenching his fists, bright blue flames engulfed Hadrian's arms, signifying its weakened form due to the sealing of his demon form. A hand touched Hadrian's chin, softly pushing his head up to Lilith's sad yet smiling face. "I'll be back. I promise you," Lilith whispers as she places her lips on Hadrian's, pulling the demoness into a tight hug as their kiss became more intimate. Soon Hadrian felt Lilith eventually pull away from his arms. "I need to go. I will visit when I have the time, and when the rebellion is over we can be together again," Lilith says with a smile. Nodding his head, Hadrian let out a sigh. The young devil slayer knew about the possibility of a rebellion as Lilith had spoken of. Whispers of a possible war. The young potter just didn't expect it to be so soon. "What should I do?" Hadrian asks with a frown. "There are these things that the humans have. Guilds, it would be a good place for you to train and grow and experience the demoness," informs the young devil slayer. As she looked down at her mate, a coy grin formed on Lilith's face as she leaned down. "Hey, if you find some beauties in the guilds, do let me know. I have always wanted a threesome," Lilith says, causing Hadrian's eyes to widen in shock and surprise. "What?" Hadrian exclaims. Giggling in amusement, Lilith disappears in a swirl of purple fire, leaving their home and returning to purgatory. Sighing slightly, Hadrian shook his head as his face went blank. Knowing that Lilith would want him to join a guild, the young devil slayer headed upstairs, grabbing a black shirt and throwing on a black coat. Hadrian grasped Armageddon and strapped the sword and sheath to his back. With not much to take with him and without the resources to take it, Hadrian left his home, magically locking it with his and Lilith's magic as the only ones able to access the home, and headed out, walking in a random direction in the hopes to find a guild to spend the next who knows how long with them. This will be fantastic, Hadrian thought sarcastically, having a slight dislike towards humans in general. And so, in the year X773, the young Devil Slayer walks away from his home towards the people he would one day call his family. And one thing I never really liked about the three Slayers types is that they never made the Slayers unique. I always found it odd, as to me, they were basically just a copy and paste of Dragon Slayers. Sure, I could understand the similarities since they are Slayers, but they just seemed similar in my eyes, and so I made a list of the rankings on the categories of the different Slayers. Power. Raw power. 1. Dragon Slayer 8 out of 10. 2. Ghoul Slayer 6, 5, 0. 3. Devil Slayer 5 out of 10. Healing. Broken Bone. 1. Devil Slayer. 2 to 10 seconds depending on how much magic the Slayer has if the Slayer has magic left. 2. God Slayer. 2 days. 3. Dragon Slayer 4 days. Magical Container. How much the blood affects the container growth. One thing I wanted to do was based on the blood within the Slayer, or in some cases lacrima, will affect the growth of the magical container within the Slayer. So if the Slayer were to do the same training, then they will all have different results in growth. En Ghoul Slayer 7 Oktober. 2. Devil Slayer 4 out of 10. 3. Dragon Slayer 3 out of 10. Magical Absorption. This is the ability of how much magic is gained through their element. 1. Devil Slayers 8 out of 10. 2. Dragon/God Slayers 5 out of 10. Forms. This is the final form of the Slayer and their true power. 1. Dragon Form, Dragon Slayer, 9 out of 10. 2. True Demon Form, Devil Slayer, July 10th. 3. Divine Form, God Slayer, 6 out of 10. Force Forms. This is the incomplete state of the Slayer and the power increase. 1. Dragon Force, Dragon Slayer, 6 out of 10. 2. Ghoul Force, Ghoul Slayer, 5 Oktober. 3. Demon Form, Devil Slayer, 4 out of 10 senses. Dragon Slayer. All 5 senses dialed up to 11, near impossible to fool. Warning. Enhanced senses will result in severe motion. Sickness when the Slayer becomes stronger. Can be reduces through training. Devil Slayer. The Slayer gains a 6th sense, allowing them to detect any and all magical energies, allowing them to detect any demonic energy or blood. As a result, Devil Slayers are capable of sensing other Slayers due to their altered energies. Warning. Too many large sources of magic can cause the Slayer's vision to blur to compensate the overuse of the 6th sense. Can be reduced through training. God Slayer. Within a certain vicinity, the Slayer is capable of sensing any individual within their element or using said element. This in turn makes it nearly impossible to not be detected by the Slayer. Note, despite the incredible use of this power, its range is the size of a normal house when untrained, but should the sense be trained, it could reach up to a medium-sized town. No repercussions for these senses. Force accessibility. This is how easy it is to unlock and use the Slayer Force, and how easy it is to gain the ability to master it. 1. Demon Form, 10 out of 10. Note, all true Devil Slayers have gained their forms at incredibly early ages. 2. Dragon Force 3 out of 10. 3. God Force 2 out of 10. Wrath. This is the increase of magical power based on the enraged state of the Slayer. 1. Devil Slayer, 10 out of 10. 2. Dragon Slayer, 6 out of 10. 3. God Slayer, 4 out of 10. The reason true Devil Slayers are a 10 is due to the fact that their magic/curse is powered by dark emotions. So when the Devil Slayer is enraged, then they will gain a monumental power boost. Resistance. This is the resistance to the Slayer's element. 1. Dragon/God Slayer September 10th. Warning. Dragon and God Slayers are not immune to the curse variant of their element. 2. Devil Slayer 1 out of 10. Devil Slayers have nearly no resistance to the same element unless it is their own magic due to their unnatural ability to absorb magic from any of their element within their vicinity. Magic/curse. This is the chances of Slayers of the same element winning in a free-for-all against each other. 1. Devil Slayer 7 out of 10. The vicinity of the same element will allow the Slayer to regain magic from the element. Warning. Consuming Devil Slayer curse/magic will result in a high chance of death due to demonic energy within the element. Do not consume or absorb true Devil Slayer magic. 2. Dragon/God Slayer. 3 out of 10. One thing about all three Slayers is that they are all incredibly strong and have their own strengths. In terms of sheer raw power, Dragon Slayers have the win. In terms of lasting in a magic battle, the God Slayers have the win due to their larger magical container. In terms of lasting a battle overall, the true Devil Slayers have the win. But one thing that should be known is that should a Slayer fight anyone of the same element that are not a Slayer themselves would have a near guaranteed win. Ruthless. How ruthless a Slayer is naturally. 1. Devil Slayer October 10th Warning. The use of Devil Slayer magic results in the suppression of positive emotions during its use, resulting in every true Devil Slayer to be incredibly ruthless when using their magic in a real battle. Sparring/training are partially affected. 2. Dragon/God Slayer 5 out of 10. Due to the fact that they are Slayers, both Dragon and God Slayers will be more likely to be brutal in combat due to their instincts programmed to fight to kill. These instincts can be suppressed. Danger rating. Dragon God Devil Slayer 9 out of 10. Warning. All Slayers are incredibly dangerous and should not be angered. A fully realized Slayer is capable of destroying entire countries with nothing left in their wake. Warning. The combined forces of Devil, Dragon, God Slayer will result in the guaranteed destruction of the opposition. Must note, this entire list should not be taken to heart when reading the story, as all the Slayers will have different training methods, different elements which results in different capabilities, different fighting styles, and different experiences. The reason for this list is for the Slayers in general. Fairy Tale. Chapter 2. Fairy Tale. The sky was dark as night had arrived. The moon covered by the clouds submerged the land below in darkness. Every sane man, woman, and child hid within their towns and homes to avoid getting caught by the beasts that lurk in the darkness of night. Hiding within the branches, a pair of emerald green eyes with a shine of silver glowed within the darkness. Hadrian narrowed his eyes as he watched as a deer trotted before coming to a complete stop near a patch of grass. His emerald green eyes had a tinge of silver, and his pupils were no longer present. The young Devil Slayer titled his head slightly, causing his eyes to shine in the darkness. Drawing his sword, Hadrian dropped, landing on top of the deer, and with one move, stabbed into its body and piercing its lung. The deer struggled, attempting to escape the Devil Slayer's grasp. As the seconds passed, the deer's struggling began to weaken before it soon went limp, unmoving. Looking down at the deer with an emotionless gaze, Hadrian pulled Armageddon out of the deer and swung the sword outwards, blood flying off the sword and splattering across the dirt. Time for dinner, Hadrian thought as he gazed down at the dead deer. Break. The sound of fire crackling can be heard as a deer roasted over a pit of fire. Watching as the deer was cooked, Hadrian stared at the flames, his eyes back to its normal state with black pupils visible, his emerald green eyes now lacking the silver shine to it. Humming to himself, Hadrian eventually stood up, removing the carcass from the flames and chopping the deer apart. As he began to eat the deer, the young Devil Slayer was consumed by his thoughts. As of now, he was by himself. Lilith was no longer with him, as she had a rebellion to stop along with her brother, Lucifer. And with no one at home, there was no point staying, and as Lilith wanted him to. Hadrian would find a guild and stay there for the time being. Now how the hell do I find a guild? Hadrian wondered as he bit into the meat, chewing on the cooked deer with thoughts clouding his mind. Closing his eyes, the young Devil Slayer laid down on a nearby patch of grass, relaxing as he listened to the rustling of the leaves as the cool wind blew past. Letting out a content sigh, Hadrian felt himself slowly drift off to sleep, the fire nearby keeping the area partially lit. Hadrian's eyes snapped open and he sat up, eyes narrowed as he felt darkness overwhelm the area. Scowling, Hadrian stood up as he sensed several beings of killing intent pass by, not too close to notice him, but close enough for the young Devil Slayer to sense them. With a snarl, the younger Potter chased after the source of the killing intent and darkness. As he continued to chase after the source, the young Devil Slayer sensed that they were staying all in one area, others of the same darkness with them. As Hadrian reached them, the young Devil Slayer frowned as he saw a group of humans dressed in black robes with hoods over their heads. Narrowing his eyes, Hadrian moved closer to the group, his eyes now gaining a silver shine as his pupils were no longer present. In the cover of darkness, the young devil slayer was able to get close enough with the trees, helping him hide from them. How long until they get here? Black-robed man number 1 asked, a tinge of irritation in his voice. They will get here when they get here. The leader of the group snapped as he waited, leaning against a tree, tapping his arm nervously. A sigh escaped number 1 as he rubbed his forehead from under his hood. Relax, there is nothing to worry about, a feminine voice stated, causing the group to turn to see a female walk towards them, wearing a similar robe as them, but lacking the hood. This is getting interesting, Hadrian thought to himself as he sat atop a branch, gazing down at the group below. The leader of the group pushes himself off the tree and makes his way towards the woman, arms crossed. So, do you have what we need? The leader demands. The woman scoffed and held out her hand. Re-equip. The woman casted a spell, and Hadrian blinked as a book appeared in her hand. Immediately, Hadrian tenses as he senses a large amount of demonic energy from the book. A growl forced its way out of the young devil slayer's throat as he knew what that book was. Aetherius demon, Hadrian scowled. Raising his hand up, Hadrian grasped the handle of Armageddon and drew the blade silently, ready to strike when the opportunity was there. So you do have it. A deal's a deal, the leader says, holding out an odd-looking crystal that radiates power. Lacrima, Hadrian thought as he got ready. When they both go to hand each other the item, then I will make my move. As both the leader and the woman stare at each other, slowly they hold out both items and slowly begin to reach for the item they desire. Now! Hadrian yelled in his mind, and without hesitation, Hadrian lunged forward, landing in front of the woman and the leader of the group with his sword out. In one smooth swing, the young devil slayer slashed both arms of the man and woman, blood flying from their now amputated limbs. A scream of pain forced its way out of both the leader and the woman as the items that they held flew into the air. Narrowing his eyes at the Lacrima and Book of Zereth, Hadrian snatched both items out of the air with one arm and twisted his body, avoiding a ball of fire that was sent his way. Looking down at his hand, Hadrian grinned as he saw that held both Lacrima and Book in his grasp. Now time for these idiots, Hadrian thought as he turned towards the group of dark-robed men. Ignoring their leader and the woman who were currently on the ground, blood spraying out of their amputated limbs. Show me what you got, Hadrian smirked, raising Armageddon and pointing the blade at the group, his eyes glowing menacingly in the dark. One man in particular felt abnormally brave and charged at Hadrian. Do you bust out? The man roared as brought his fist down on Hadrian as rocks formed over his arm. Scoffing at the slowness of the attack, Hadrian stepped back, watching as the man missed him completely, slamming his stone fist into the dirt, embedding his arm into the ground. With a twist of his body, Hadrian kicked the man's arm with one powerful kick. Crash! The man screamed in pain as his arm shattered, leaving only a stump of what used to be where his arm was. So he changed his entire arm into stone itself. How stupid, Hadrian thought, shaking his head at the man's stupidity. While turning your body into stone sounded like a good idea on paper, but in reality, it was the stupidest thing you can do. And with that, the young devil slayer took advantage of the man's horror and swung his sword at him. The group behind the man watched in horror as the man's head soared through the sky, a look of shock and horror on his face. Thud! The dissipated body fell to the ground limp, cracking his neck. Hadrian twirled Armageddon around his hand before holding the blade in a loose grip, blade pointing to the ground. Anyone else? Hadrian asks with a raised eyebrow. The group shook with fear as the young devil slayer's eyes glared into their souls. With rage in their eyes, several members of the group drew out swords and summoned their magic and charged at the young potter. Scoffing at their recklessness, Hadrian focused his magic into Armageddon, igniting the blade in bright blue flames. Devil sword style, Hellfire purge, Hadrian chanted, swinging the blade with one move. A wave of fire charged towards the group who barely had time to react before screaming in pain as the fire consumed them. Looking at the remains of what was once a group of humans, Hadrian couldn't help but let out a breath of disappointment. unimpressed with the lack of power or skill that the group had. Turning towards the leader of the now deceased group and the woman, Hadrian blinked as he noticed that the woman had disappeared, leaving behind a puddle of blood with her arm nowhere in sight. Damn, I should have paid more attention to my surroundings. The young devil slayer cursed before turning towards the leader, who remained on the ground on the verge of bleeding out. Taking a step toward the man as he sheathed his sword, Hadrian grasped the leader's collar, lifting him up. "What was your plan here?" Hadrian demanded, glaring down at the man. With his eyes drooping, the man glared up at the young devil slayer with what little strength he had left. "Freak! Off!" the man responded, his breathing weak and his voice barely above a whisper. Scowling in frustration, Hadrian pulled the man forward as the young devil slayer pulled his head back. Crack! Headbutting the man in the nose. Hadrian heard a pained whine from the downed man as his nose broke. "I am not going to ask you again," Hadrian snapped, gripping the man's collar tightly. "It doesn't matter. You won't. Stop." The man's breathing ceased, his eyes going blank as his body went limp. "Damn," the young devil slayer cursed as he realized his grip on the man's collar, letting the body fall onto the ground with a thud. Letting out an annoyed sigh, Hadrian looked down at his occupied hand where the book and lacrima were held. Grabbing the lacrima with his right hand, Hadrian narrowed his eyes as he brought the crystal up to his eye, looking into the crystal as he turned it, looking at the lacrima from different angles. "It definitely has something. They wouldn't smuggle a regular common-use lacrima, so this was something that I could take advantage of," Hadrian thought as he placed the lacrima in his pocket and turned his full attention to the book. Looking at the cover, Hadrian couldn't help but frown as he saw no title, its cover blank with only dark leather keeping the pages bound. Shrugging it off, Hadrian focused his magic into his hand and watched his flames form in his hands, soon engulfing the book in its bright blue flames. Sensing the demonic energy being burned from his hellfire, Hadrian clenched his fist and watched as the book was turned to ash, leaving nothing of what it once was. Shaking his hand to the ash, Hadrian frowned as he sensed a magical energy near his location, steadily moving towards him. Narrowing his eyes, Hadrian brought his hand to the handle of Armageddon, ready to fight whoever might be making their way towards him. Soon the rattle of leaves could be heard, and a man walked out. The man had short dark blue hair, an unshaven face, and black eyes. He was wearing a white coat, brown pants, and a black shirt where a silver chain with a large S dangled from his neck. The man paused, staring at Hadrian with surprise in his eyes. "Hello there. What are you doing out here so late?" the man asked in surprise. Hadrian scoffed, moving his hand away from the handle of Armageddon, not sensing any dark intent from the man. "I'm here for a stroll. Just love the night with crazy maniacs running around," the young devil slayer answered sarcastically. The man blinked at Hadrian in surprise, then snorted. Soon laughter followed as he clutched his stomach. "Oh, such a cheeky little bugger, huh? Well, I suggest you be careful. There are a group of dark wizards in this forest," the man warns Hadrian as his laughter dies down. Hadrian raises an eyebrow and points his thumb towards the corpse of the leader. This causes the man to blink. Moving past the young devil slayer, the man kneels before the corpse with a small frown on his face. "What happened to him?" the man wondered out loud. "He died," Hadrian answers with a blank expression on his face. The man blinked, looking at the young devil slayer with an odd look on his face. "Aren't you a little bit worried?" "He's dead, and we have no idea what happened to him," the man asked, worried. The young potter shrugged his shoulders with an uncaring expression. "The bastard wanted a book of Zereth, so I killed him and his group," Hadrian states, not giving the slightest shit about admitting to murder. The man frowned, staring at Hadrian as a pit formed in his stomach. No child should be so comfortable with the thought of taking another life, the man thought as pondered on what he should do. "So if that's all, I shall be on my way," the young devil slayer states as he turns around, placing his hands in his pockets as he begins to walk away from the scene. "Wait!" the man called out, causing Hadrian to come to a stop. "What?" Hadrian asks with hints of irritation in his voice. Taking a deep breath, the man silently pumps himself up as the young devil slayer's eyes send shivers down his spine. "Do you want to join my guild? We would certainly accept you," the man offers, silently pleading to any god or goddess that could hear that the young boy would accept the offer. Raising an eyebrow at the sudden offer, Hadrian ponders his options. Lilith did say that I should join a guild, but she didn't say I had to, the young devil slayer thought to himself, inspecting the man that stood before him. What is your name? Hadrian asks, pulling his hands out of his pockets and crossing his arms over his chest. Oh, my name is Macau. The man, now known as Macau, introduces himself, slightly surprised at the sudden question. Grunting to himself, Hadrian breathed deeply as he thought about the man's offer. What are the rules in this guild of yours? The young devil slayer asks, the man very answer determining whether he joins the guild or not. Blinking in surprise, Macau chuckles as he rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Well, that's the thing. There are not that many rules, if any. One thing you would need is magic, which from the looks of things you do. The second is that you don't, well, kill people. Macau finished. Goodbye, Hadrian says as he turns around and begins to walk off. Wait, Macau screams wide-eyed, worried about leaving the young devil slayer alone on the path he currently walked, fearful of what type of person the young potter could become without some sort of interference. What now? The young devil slayer growled, turning his eyes back to Macau as they shined silver. Fidgeting slightly, Macau internally scolds himself before taking a deep breath. We can make some exceptions to the killing rule, Macau states, feeling a bile form in his throat at the thought of a child killing people. Staring at Macau with a calculating gaze, the young devil slayer raised an eyebrow at his response. Go on, Hadrian urges, curious as to what the man was referring to. The first, and one I am certain that the master would agree with, is that you do not kill innocent people, Macau informs the young devil slayer. Scoffing, Hadrian shook his head in disbelief. Seriously? I have no desire to harm innocent people. It's the bastards like the ones behind you that are not safe from me, Hadrian growled. Taking a deep breath, the man ignored the corpse behind him, focusing on the task at hand. Okay, then overall you would be fine with the master, Macau states, internally wincing at his response. Overall? What are you on about now? Hadrian demanded with narrowed eyes. Seeing the silver in the young devil slayer's eyes, Macau couldn't help but compare them to the many animals that he had seen in the night. Well, the master would like it that you spare dark wizards, but he would certainly give you some leeway if they are really bad, Macau answers as calmly as he could. Letting out a growl, Hadrian rubbed the bridge of his nose in frustration. What the freak is the point of joining a guild if they don't like me killing evil bastards? The young devil slayer thought, irritated. Look, how about we talk to the master and take it from there, Macau offers. Looking back at Macau, the young potter weighed his options before ultimately accepting. Fine, but if I don't like it then, I am out, Hadrian states firmly. Nodding his head, Macau began to lead Hadrian out of the forest and towards a town. Can you wait at the train station? I just need a minute, Macau asks, hopeful, pointing at the station. Looking up at the man, Hadrian shrugged his shoulders and made his way towards the train station. As Macau watched the young devil slayer leave, the elder man bent over and began to throw up, the memory of the man's corpse still fresh in his mind. Master, I hope you can find a way to help him, Macau thought, knowing that it was not normal for kids to willingly take a life and be unaffected by it. Flashback. Lilith stood before an 8-year-old Hadrian, his horns protruding from his head and his scarab black, his demon form yet to be sealed. The young devil slayer stared up at the demoness with a curious expression on his face. It's time for one of the most important lessons of being a devil slayer, Lilith states with a firm gaze. Giddy with excitement, the young devil slayer grinned, ready for what Lilith had for him. And that is? The young potter asks, curious. Lilith grinned, her eyes shining with mischief. Control, the demoness responds. Hadrian stood there, blinking with a blank expression on his face. Control? The young devil slayer asks in disbelief. Lilith merely smiled as she looked down at the confused potter. Yep, Lilith responds, cheekily patting Hadrian on the head. Huffing in annoyance, the young devil slayer crossed his arms over his chest, narrowing his eyes at Lilith. I thought we were doing something important, Hadrian asked with childlike naivety. Lilith sighed, shaking her head with disappointment. I see that it has yet to occur to you how important control is. But don't worry, I will show you why. Lilith smirks, and before Hadrian knew it, he was flying through the sky and falling into the volcano near their home. Landing on the edge of a stone cliff within the volcano, Hadrian pushed himself up and blinked as his veins began to glow a bright purple as he felt his magic surge within him as his body absorbed the energy from the lava nearby. Shaking his head with a confused expression, Hadrian blinked as he saw Lilith standing before him in her demon form. Control is incredibly important, and as you can see that with our element near us, we can absorb the energy it gives out, making us incredibly powerful. But as you well know, this power comes at a cost. Unlike your fellow Slayers, we are not immune to fire-based attacks or magic unless it is our own. Now fight me, Lilith demanded as her wings spread out and dark purple fire covered Lilith's form. The young Devil Slayer frowned as he looked around him. We can't fight. We use anything too powerful, then we could set off the volcano. Hadrian protested. Without a word, Lilith lunged at Hadrian, claws extended. Quickly rolling to the side, Hadrian watched as Lilith's claws embed itself into the stone right before the demoness pulled it out. Then control your output. Otherwise, we will be drowning in lava. And it sure as hell is going to hurt, Lilith stated as she lunged at Hadrian once more. Realizing that Lilith was not going to stop, Hadrian growled as bright purple flames covered his arms. Blinking in surprise at the change in his fire, Hadrian didn't have time to react as Lilith's claws struck the side of his face, flinging the young Devil Slayer across the stone, coming to a stop with his belly against the ground. Growling to himself, Hadrian raised his head up, revealing a large clawed cut right before it healed with unnatural speed. Frowning to himself, Hadrian stood up from the ground and clenched his fist, noticing the lack of drain in his magical container. Pay attention, Lilith yelled as she appeared above Hadrian. Quickly jumping to the side, Hadrian's body was engulfed in purple fire, narrowing his eyes at the demoness. All right, you want to fight? Then let's fight. Hadrian snarls as his flames grew a little darker as they increased in strength. Flashback end. Within the train, heading towards the guild that Macau is a part of, Hadrian's eyes snap open as he senses a large source of power not too far from his location. What kind of power is that? It has no demonic energy within it, so it must be human. The young Devil Slayer thought to himself as he sat up. Macau notices this and frowned at the young potter. Hey, you okay, kid? Macau asked worried. Hadrian nodded his head in confirmation as he yawned. Yeah, I'm fine. Just sensed an incredibly large power. That's all, Hadrian answers with a shrug. The dark-haired man blinks at the Devil Slayer, tilting his head slightly in confusion. Really, where was it coming from? Macau asks, just as the train slowly came to a stop. Somewhere over there, Hadrian answers, pointing in the direction he felt the energy, which also had many buildings in the way. Macau frowned as he realized what Hadrian was referring to. He can actually sense the master. That's not normal, even for an S-class. Macau thought to himself. We have arrived at Magnolia, a woman's voice spoke from the intercom. Well, looks like we are here, Macau said as he stood up from his seat. Nodding his head in understanding, the young Devil Slayer stood up from his seat and followed the dark-haired man. As the duo left the station, Hadrian noted the warm and friendly atmosphere around Magnolia. Overall, the people seemed relaxed and comfortable, as some people relaxed in the park with the sun shining overhead. We are almost at the guild, Macau informs Hadrian with a small but excited smile on his face. Letting out a grunt of acknowledgement, the young potter frowned as he noticed that they were getting closer and closer to the large power. That must mean that this person is a part of the guild. How interesting, Hadrian thought to himself as they finally reached their destination. This is the guild, Macau says proudly. Looking up at the building, Hadrian tilted his head as he saw the name. Fairy Tale? The young Devil Slayer couldn't help but ponder the odd name. At the top of the guild was the Fairy Tale emblem, proudly shown as it swayed in the wind. Bang! Macau opened the door only to receive a table to the face. Hadrian blinked at the sudden furniture. Are the furniture rebelling? The young Devil Slayer wondered as he looked inside the guild. Chaos, absolute chaos. Inside the guild hall, tables and people fly across the hall as they were in the middle of a brawl. Raising an eyebrow, Hadrian turned towards Macau, only to pause as he saw that the dark-haired man was no longer next to him. "Come on!" In the middle of the brawl, Macau yelled as he was then tackled by some random man. Shrugging it off, Hadrian entered the guild, staying to the side as he avoided the flying mugs, tables, and people, making his way towards the bar where a tiny old man sat in a jester outfit. "He's the strongest here. Must either be the leader or an important member of this guild," the young devil slayer thought as he made his way towards the man. Taking a sip of his mug, the old man looked up to see Hadrian walking towards him. "What can I do for you, my boy?" the man asked with a small smile. "I met Macau, and he suggested I join the guild," the young devil slayer answers with a passive expression on his face. The old man blinks before a smile forms on his face. "Well now, that is interesting. Welcome to Fairy Tale. Just get a stamp from our lovely bartender, and you are one of us," the old man says happily. Hadrian looked at the bartender with a frown before turning his attention back to the old man. "We will see. We will need to discuss more on whether or not I am joining," the young devil slayer states, receiving a raised eyebrow from the old man in response. "Very well. What is your name, may I ask?" the old man asks, curious. "Hadrian," the young potter answers. Nodding his head, Makarov smiled at the young boy. "I am Makarov, master of this guild," the old man, now introduced as Makarov, greeted. "I'll talk to the master." "Why don't you meet the kids here from beside Hadrian?" Macau suggested as he looked down at the young slayer. "What's the point? I might not even join," Hadrian asks, hints of irritation in his tone. "And you might join. Won't hurt to meet other people," Macau responds with a shrug. Letting out a grunt, Hadrian looked around and saw a few kids sitting at one of the tables. Letting out a sigh, the young devil slayer left the men at the bar, making his way towards the children. "I believe it is best we talk in your office, master," Macau said as he looked at Makarov with a serious expression on his face. Noting the seriousness in the dark-haired man's behavior, Makarov nodded his head and led the man upstairs to the guild master's office. As the young potter got closer to the table, a young brown-haired girl wearing an orange dress perked up as she turned to see Hadrian, making his way towards them. "Oh, hello there. Are you joining the guild?" the young girl asked with curiosity shining in her eyes. Looking at the young girl, Hadrian couldn't help but blink in surprise as he felt an unnaturally large amount of magic emanating from her, making her on par with many of the adults in the guild. "Now that is interesting," the young slayer thought to himself. "We shall see," Hadrian answers calmly. Frowning slightly, the young girl shook her head and smiled. "Well, I'm Kana. It's nice to meet you," Kana introduced herself, holding out her hand. Hadrian, the devil slayer, introduced himself as he shook the young girl's hand. Releasing his hand from Kana's grip, Hadrian noted the curious looks of the other kids at their table. "Oh, I should introduce you to everyone," Kana says as she grabs the young slayer's arm, slowly pulling him towards the others. "This is Levi and her friends, Jet and Droy." Kana introduces a young blue-haired girl and a ginger and black-haired boy. Nodding to the trio in greeting, Hadrian stumbled slightly as Kana pulled him towards a blonde-haired teen who was leaning against a nearby wall with his eyes closed and headphones on his ears. With a smile, the brown-haired girl pulled his headphones off, causing the young teen to sigh tiredly. "What do you want now, Kana?" the blonde asks, hints of annoyance in his tone. "Stop being such a party pooper." "Hadrian, this is Laxus," Kana introduces the teen with a smile. Laxus looked down at Hadrian with a raised eyebrow as the young slayer looked up with a narrowed gaze. His magic is draconic in nature. He is definitely not a dragon, and there is only one other way to gain draconic magic, Hadrian thought to himself. "Didn't know I would meet another slayer this soon." "What generation are you?" Hadrian asks with a raised eyebrow. Laxus' eyes widened in shock as he stared down at the devil slayer. "Kana, can I talk to the kid for a bit?" Laxus asks, turning to the young brunette. Kana tilted her head with a confused expression on her face before ultimately shrugging her shoulders and walking off. "How did you know about that?" Laxus hissed with a worried look on his face. Raising an unimpressed eyebrow at the elder boy's reaction, Hadrian crossed his arms and scoffed. "Seriously? The fact that you had yet to smell it indicates that you are a second-generation slayer, which means you know nothing of your fellow slayers and our traditions," the young devil slayer states with narrowed eyes. The blonde teen blinks before frowning. What do you mean by tradition? What are you talking about? Laxus demands with sheer confusion on his face. Sighing in frustration, Hadrian shook his head as he lowered his arms, placing his hand on his hip. I am a devil slayer. As a result, I was raised by a demon to receive my power. One of the many things I was taught was about my fellow slayers and our traditions. One of the many things about devil slayers is that we can sense the magic within a person, which means I sense the draconic magic within you, making you a dragon slayer, the young potter answers with a blank expression on his face. Laxus stared down at Hadrian with a gaping mouth. A devil slayer? Laxus asks, stuttering slightly, eyes wide. Yes, a devil slayer. One thing about us slayers is that we gain the characteristics of the creatures we slay. As a result, you will gain the dragon force, which will make you gain the power of a dragon, while for me, I gain a demon form. You with me? Hadrian asks with a raised eyebrow. Laxus nodded his head, captivated by what the young devil slayer was telling him. How similar is our magic? Laxus couldn't help but ask. Smiling slightly at the blonde's curiosity, Hadrian couldn't help but wonder if he had something in mind. The basics of our magic are pretty much the same. It's the advanced part of our slayer magic where the slayer types branch off, the young potter responds. Laxus couldn't help but want to ask the young slayer a question, but the prideful part of him protested the very thought of it. Screw it, Laxus thought to himself. Can you teach me? Laxus asks with a hopeful tone. Hadrian blinked, raising an eyebrow in surprise. Now that's something. Us slayers are incredibly prideful. To even ask me is actually quite impressive, Hadrian complimented. The teen dragon slayer nearly stumbled in surprise. This was the first time he had ever been complimented for something he did, not from the fact of who his old man was. If I join the guild, then sure, I will teach you what I know of dragon slayer magic, the young devil slayer answers with a shrug. Laxus nodded his head, a small smile on his face at the thought of learning more about his dragon slayer magic that he now had from the lacrima inside of him. Unknown to the young teen, the slayer side of him that had been developed by the lacrima held an unknowing form of respect to the young devil slayer. The young potter's very presence was strong as a result of his curse power and the training he had undergone. With Makarov and Mikau, I see Makarov, the guild master of fairy tale, couldn't help but frown as he sat in his office. Mikau sitting in a chair in front of his desk. What do you think, master? Mikau asks with a frown. Makarov sighed as he rubbed the bridge of his nose in contemplation. The old man was in a tricky situation. Hadrian, the young boy, killed someone. It was wrong and against what fairy tale stood for. But there's a chance that the young boy could be brought back into the light with the help of fairy tale. Our enemies today could be our friends tomorrow, Makarov thought to himself. Humming in thought, the old man looked up at Mikau, inspecting the dark-haired man before him. What do you believe I should do, Mikau? Makarov asks with a raised eyebrow. Sighing slightly, Mikau rubbed his forehead with a frown. That's the thing, master. He kills. It isn't our way, as you have said many times. But it also isn't our way to let someone like Hadrian continue on his path. If we could help him, Mikau responds, leaning back on his chair with a sigh. Makarov smiled slightly, amused by the dark-haired man's response. I shall talk to him. Can you ask him to come up and see me? Makarov asks. Nodding his head, Mikau stood up from his chair and began making his way towards the door to the office. I will send him up. Have fun with the master. He is stubborn, Mikau warns. With those last few words, the dark-haired man opened the door to the office and left, leaving the master of fairy tale alone in his office. With Hadrian, Kana looked on with a tilted head, her eyes filled with curiosity as she stared at the object in question. So, why do you have a sword on your back? I just noticed that now, Kana asks, turning her attention back to the young slayer. It was a gift, the young potter answers. Kana couldn't help but wonder who gave the devil slayer his sword, but ultimately was distracted when Mikau made his way down the stairs. Hey, Hadrian, the master wants to see you, the dark-haired man says, catching the young slayer's attention. Well, this will determine whether I stay or I go, Hadrian thought to himself as he nodded to Mikau before the dark-haired man led him up the stairs and towards the master's office. Opening the door to the office, Hadrian saw Makarov sitting in his chair with a warm smile on his face. "Hello, my boy. What do you think of the others so far?" The guild master asks with curiosity in his voice. Letting out a grunt, Hadrian moved into the office, looking back outside only to notice that Macau was no longer around, meaning he had gone back downstairs. Making his way towards the desk, the young devil slayer sat on one of the chairs that was placed in front of the guild master. "I believe that you would rather get straight to the point. Am I right?" Makarov asks with a knowing gaze. Raising an eyebrow at the blunt question, Hadrian ultimately nodded his head in agreement, preferring to get straight to the point. "Never been one to skirt around a subject, so yes, I would rather get straight to the point," the devil slayer answered, leaning back on the chair. Nodding his head, Makarov's posture became more serious as he inspected the young potter before him. Wearing a black coat and pants with a dark blue shirt, the thing that caught the old man's attention was the sword on his back. The dark energy stored within the blade was unnatural, possibly explaining the young boy's behavior. "Macau told me that you might be interested in joining Fairy Tale, but won't based on what we agree, correct?" Makarov asks, wanting to at least confirm what the dark-haired man had told him. "That is right," Hadrian confirmed with a nod. The guild master couldn't help but let out a sigh as he saw the familiar look in the young devil slayer's eyes. "Very well. Macau also informed me of the Zerif worshippers that you had killed." Makarov couldn't help but wince at his words, but knew that wasting the young boy's time was not going to help things. "Yes, I did," Hadrian confirmed with a blank expression on his face and a firm gaze. The guild master flinched as he recognized those eyes. The same eyes he had seen of soldiers who had been in wars, people who were willing to do what it takes for what they believe in. How can such a young child have those eyes? Makarov couldn't help but wonder with worry in his eyes. "Do you regret killing them?" the old man asks cautiously, not wanting to anger the young boy. "No," the young devil slayer responded calmly. Sighing internally, Makarov knew that if the young boy were to join their guild so he could be brought back to the light, then exceptions would need to be made on their no-kill rule. "I truly don't like the thought of allowing him to kill, but what other choice do I have other than informing the council? And that would be counterproductive," Makarov thought with a small sigh. "I am certain that we don't really like killing in this guild, correct?" Makarov asks, wanting to confirm the young boy's knowledge. Narrowing his eyes, Hadrian slowly nodded his head in confirmation. "Very well. I am certain that Macau informed you that there could be some exceptions to that, correct?" Once more the young devil slayer nodded his head. "Very well. The way I see it is that you won't stop killing. But are you willing to spare some individuals depending on who they are and what they do?" Makarov asks, wanting to find some sort of middle ground that the both of them could get to. Looking at Makarov from across the desk, Hadrian nodded his head. "Yeah, I can be more merciful depending on what they have done. Doesn't mean they won't be hurt, but I can spare their life." Hadrian responds, crossing his arm over his chest. Letting out a sigh of relief, Makarov felt some form of elation at the progress that the both of them were making. "Okay, are you willing to spare thieves, bandits, and the like?" Makarov asks, curious, raising an eyebrow. Hadrian raised his hand up and gave a sus. "If the bandits just robbed, then sure, I can spare them. But if they murdered people, then it will be a different story," the devil slayer states. Nodding his head, Makarov felt a migraine beginning to form at the thought of the chaos that the young devil slayer will cause should he join. "Okay, so you are willing to spare those who haven't killed someone?" the guild master asks, wanting to verify the young boy's statement. "Yes. Murders, rapists, cultists, and the like are a whole nother story. But thieves, robbers, and those who haven't claimed an innocent life, I can spare," Hadrian says to the old man. Despite not liking the thought of Hadrian killing people, the old man knew that that was the best he was going to get from the young devil slayer. "Very well, I can accept that. Welcome to Fairy Tale," Makarov says, holding his hand out for a handshake. With a nod, Hadrian reached out his hand and shook the old man's hand. "Well, come on then. Let's head out and tell everyone the good news," Makarov says with a bright smile, despite the slight worry in his eyes. As Makarov stood up from his chair, the old man paused, frowning slightly. "What magic do you use?" the guild master asks, curious. A snort escaped Hadrian as he shook his head with a small, amused smile. I am a true devil slayer, the young devil slayer informed the guild master, uncaring about how the old man would react to such information. Makarov froze, eyes wide with shock. A true devil slayer? Might need to look them up to find out more about them, Makarov thought to himself before ultimately shaking his head and leading Hadrian out of the office. Attention, everyone! Makarov yelled, gaining the attention of everyone in the guild hall. As of today, we have a new member, so let's party. Immediately cheers chorused throughout the guild hall as many members celebrated the welcoming of the young potter. Smiling at many of the members of the guild, Makarov turned to Hadrian, patting the devil slayer on the shoulder. Go down to the bartender and they will give you the G mark, Makarov informs the young slayer. With a nod, Hadrian made his way towards the bar, where the bartender stood, cleaning up a mug as they turned their attention to the young devil slayer. I heard the master's announcement. So where and what color do you want your guild mark to be? The bartender asked with a small smile. Taming off his coat, Hadrian pointed to his right arm, where his bicep was. On my arm in emerald green, Hadrian answers. A chuckle escaped the bartender as they grabbed the stamp. Like your eyes, the bartender responds knowingly. Like my eyes, the young devil slayer confirmed. A hand patted Hadrian on the back just as the guild mark was stamped onto his arm. Looking at the owner of the hand, Hadrian blinked as he realized that the person who had patted his back was Kana. I really should pay more attention to my surroundings. The young devil slayer internally cursed, knowing that with the use of his sixth sense, it should be impossible for him to not know who is around him. Welcome to the guild. I know you will enjoy it here, the brunette says with a bright smile on her face. Hadrian nodded his head as he looked around at the cheering members. We shall see, Hadrian thought to himself as Kana brought him to the other kids. Not too far from the children, Makarov sat on the bar, drinking his mug with an unreadable expression. This is certainly an interesting development, Makarov thought, knowing that he would probably be spending some time to find any information on true devil slayers. First job, Chapter 3, First job, and this is the quest board. Here you will be able to find a job to earn some money. So, what do you think? Kana asks, turning to Hadrian with a smile on her face. After being welcomed by Fairy Tale, Kana took it upon herself to show the young devil slayer around the guild, excitedly showing him of all the places in the guild, even if she occasionally stated the obvious when informing the young potter of different locations of the guild. Not bad. I am curious as to what jobs I could get my hands on, Hadrian thought, recalling how Lilith would train the young devil slayer to hunt monsters in their forest. Good times, Hadrian thought to himself with a small smile. That's good to hear. I would recommend you start with the E-class quests first. They're the easiest and least dangerous. If you want to go higher, then you would need the master's permission, the brown-haired girl informed Hadrian. Frowning at that, Hadrian looked at Kana with a confused expression on his face. Why would we need to go to the master if we want to go any higher than an E-class quest? The young slayer asks, confused. Kana gave Hadrian an odd look before deciding to answer the dark-haired boy's question. The master doesn't like the idea of sending us on dangerous missions, so if we want to go any higher than our wizard ranking, then we would need to consult the master. Since you joined and are still new, you are also an E-class wizard, Kana informed the young devil slayer. Something inside of Hadrian turned. The thought of him being such a low rank was insulting to his pride as a devil slayer. Guess I am going to have to convince the old man to let me handle a dangerous quest, Hadrian thought to himself. It is early in the afternoon, so maybe you could find a job that you might like, Kana says with a small smile on her face. Looking at the brown-haired girl, Hadrian nodded his head, grunting in agreement. Might as well make some money. From what I read from the books Lilith gave me, humans use money for everything, even for having land, the young slayer thought, in slight disbelief. Hey Kana, I found some more of those cards you wanted, of the brown-haired man with the oddest-looking hairstyle that Hadrian had ever seen, called out as he handed the brown-haired girl a small cardboard box. A squeal escaped Kana as she jumped around excitedly. Thank you, Wakaba. Now I can start practicing magic, Kana says with a bright smile on her face. Hadrian blinked at the brown-haired girl's excitement before deciding to not bother to understand the odd reaction. What does playing cards have to do with magic? The young devil slayer wondered before turning his attention towards the quest board. Now let's see what I got for me. Missing cat. Please help find our cat, class. E-reward. 1,000 jewels? Jewels in this story 10. Jewels is the equivalent of $1. Yep, not worth it. Valuables gone missing. Please help locate the missing valuables, class. C. Reward, 125,000 jewels. No to that one as well. The young devil slayer grumbled to himself as he looked over the requests, all of them not suited for his skills. There has to be something good. Oh, wait a minute. Jong. Centipede attack. Request needed, giant centipede attacking travelers, class. B. Reward, 350,000 jewels. Sounds good, Hadrian thought to himself as he tore the request off the board and made his way towards the bar where Makarov sat, drinking beer from his mug. I want to do this mission, Hadrian states as he places the request on the table. Raising an eyebrow at the young devil slayer bluntness, Makarov picks up the request and begins to read it. After a few moments, Makarov places the request down. No can do. This is a B-class request, and you're still new here, the master of the guild states. Hadrian scoffs and shakes his head with an amused smile on his face. I may be new here, but this points at request is nothing new to me, Hadrian states firmly. The guild master stared down at Hadrian's eyes, as if staring into the young boy's soul. Very well, Laxus, Makarov calls out, catching the young teen's attention who was across the guild with his headphones around his neck. Cocking an eyebrow, Laxus walks over to the bar and crosses his arm at the old man. Yeah, what is it? The blonde teen asks, curious. A sigh escaped Makarov as he picked up the request, handing it to the young dragon slayer. Can you take Harry here on his first job? He is quite insistent on going, the guild master asks. Laxus blinked in surprise as he looked down at the request. You're letting him do a B-class job so soon? Why is that? Laxus asks, both confused and curious. Because despite being new here, I have good reason to believe that he is already powerful. What I am uncertain of is where he should be ranked, which is where you come in. You will go with Harry and see how he does, the guild master informs the teen. Nodding at the explanation, Laxus looks down at Hadrian, noticing the determination in his emerald green eyes. Sure, why not? Got nothing better to do, Laxus responds with a shrug. A small smile grew in Makarov's face before he nodded to the young blonde. Thank you, Laxus. Do make sure that you both come back in one piece, Makarov says with a slightly worried look in his eyes. Laxus chuckled and shrugged his shoulders. Come on, old man. I can handle it, Laxus says with a slight cocky attitude. The guild master let out a small laugh as he nodded to the young dragon slayer. Then best of luck to you, my boy, Makarov says to Laxus. Nodding his head, Laxus turned to Hadrian, who watched with his arms crossed and a passive expression on his face. You wanted this job, well, you got it. Come on, Laxus says, using his head to gesture to the door. With a single nod, Hadrian followed Laxus out of the guild as many people watched. This shall be interesting, Makarov thought to himself as he watched both slayers exit the guild hall. Break. Hadrian laid down on one of the seats in the train compartment with Laxus on the other side, laying face down on the seat, his face slightly green. I heard that stronger dragon slayers suffer severe motion sickness, but never actually seen it myself. Hadrian says out loud, slightly pitying the poor slayer for his weakness. Asterisk groan, asterisk, this is a common thing? Laxus groaned with a surprised look on his face. Nodding his head, the young devil slayer drew his sword and began inspecting it. Yep, all dragon slayers upon reaching a certain level of power suffer through severe motion sickness. In fact, one of the downsides is that the stronger the slayer, the worse the motion sickness, the young potter explains to the second-generation slayer. A groan escaped Laxus as he suffered through his motion sickness. I am grateful that I'm not like that, Hadrian thought to himself, happy that he was a devil slayer. Is there a way to get rid of this damned motion sickness? Laxus groans, struggling to move without threatening to throw up. Yeah, you need to train your weakness out. And even then it will still be uncomfortable, Hadrian answers, crossing his arms over his chest as he looks at the second-generation slayer with pity in his eyes. Laxus groaned as laid on the chair, unwilling to move. Break. Bloody finally, Laxus grumbled as he got out of the train, back to 100% the second that the train had stopped. With a small smile of amusement on his face, Hadrian walked beside the dragon slayer as the two of them entered the nearby town. So, who is the client? Laxus asks, turning to Hadrian with a raised eyebrow. Let out a hum of thought. Hadrian pulled out the request and scanned the paper, searching for the name of the client. His name is Manny, and he is the leader of the town, Hadrian answers, folding the paper and placing it in his pocket. Letting out a grunt, Laxus sped up his pace, causing the young devil slayer to frown and speed up his walking, following Laxus to a larger building than the rest of those in the town. I assume this is where the leader stays? Hadrian asks, his face betraying no emotion. Yep, Laxus answers as he opens the door, causing a frown to form on Hadrian's face. A little bit rude to just barge in, Hadrian thought to himself, but followed the blonde teen nonetheless. At the end of the room was a young lady sitting at a desk, papers in front of her with a pen in her hand. Making their way towards the woman, Laxus crossed his arms as he stood there, waiting patiently for the woman to acknowledge them. After a few moments, the woman placed her pen to the side and looked up to the two of them. "Hello, what can I do for you?" the woman asks with a warm smile. Turning towards Hadrian, Laxus tilted his head to the woman, silently telling Hadrian to answer. With a nod of understanding, the young devil slayer pulled out the request and placed it on the desk. "We are here for the job. It says that your leader wants us to get rid of a giant centipede," the black-haired boy informs the woman. Tilting her head slightly, the woman looked at the request, reading the contents of the job before looking back up to the young wizards. "Aren't you a bit young to fight a centipede?" the woman asks with a small frown. Laxus let out a breath of frustration as he shook his head. "Look, lady, we can handle ourselves, so can we do the job or not?" Laxus demands with narrowed eyes. Turning her attention to the blonde teen, the lady sighs as she nodded her head reluctantly. "Very well. Manny is currently inside and is currently available," the lady says to them, handing the job request back to Hadrian. With a nod, both slayers move away from the lady and entered the leader's office. Back at Fairy Tale, Makarov frowned as several books littered his office, all of them relating to the three known slayers in some way or form. Despite searching for information on true devil slayers, Makarov couldn't help but notice the lack of information on them, as if their very existence was taboo. Throughout history, any who even uttered the title of true devil slayer were sentenced to death. Fear and paranoia rampant during the prime of the true devil slayers. But what the guild master did notice was that the devil slayers known in the current day and age were different from what little information he could gather. While devil slayers run the risk of eventually going insane and turning into a demon, true devil slayers were different. Their very power was one of demons, something that would kill any normal human being. Why are true devil slayers such a taboo subject? Makarov couldn't help but wonder. In the past, there were many powerful and dark beings such as Yendi, Acnologia, along with the many dragons, demons, and gods that controlled Earthland. But as time had passed, many of these beings became taboo, excluding their slayer counterparts. So why are true devil slayers avoided? The guild master of Fairy Tale couldn't help but wonder. With Hadrian and Laxus crunch, the sound of shoes stepping on shriveled-up leaves can be heard within a forest as both slayers found themselves making their way towards the last sighting of the giant centipede. "Smell anything?" Hadrian asks, turning his head slightly to get a better look at Laxus. Letting out a grunt, the blonde teen shook his head, eyes narrowed in irritation. "Can't smell anything. Wherever the blasted creature is, it left a while ago," Laxus answers, his hands in his pockets as he looks around. Humming in thought, Hadrian raised an eyebrow as he noticed the laid-back attitude of Laxus, as if hunting down the creature was an everyday occurrence. "Probably is, with how confident the master was with him coming with me," the young devil slayer thought to himself, internally shrugging off the teen's attitude as just a personality trait instead of just arrogance. So what is the difference between devil slayers and dragon slayers? That's something that's been on my mind for a bit since you mentioned it, Laxus asks, turning to the young devil slayer with a raised eyebrow. Hadrian hummed in thought. While there were similarities between the slayers, there was always something that set them apart, making them unique. The first thing that comes to mind is our forms. Dragon slayers, when pushed, gain the ability to use the dragon force, a power that magnifies the user's power and makes them incredibly dangerous. For Devil Slayers, though, we gain the ability to use our demon forms, something we acquire at a young age. This means that Devil Slayers gain an upper hand compared to the other Slayers. One of the things that isn't known is that out of all the Devil Slayers are not able to grow as powerful as quickly as the three other Slayers, which is where the demon form closes the power gap, Hadrian states. Laxus blinked, surprised by the young Devil Slayer's response. Demon form? Dragon force? How strong are Slayers anyway? Laxus asks, both curious and confused. A sigh escaped Hadrian as he shook his head tiredly. How old are you? The young Devil Slayer couldn't help but ask. Frowning slightly at the question, Laxus answered. I am 13, the young teen answers calmly. Humming slightly, Hadrian shook his head with a sigh. You should have read up on Dragon Slayers. You will enter your first heat in 2 years' time, Hadrian states. Laxus froze, eyes wide with shock. Heat. Laxus stuttered in shock. Hadrian slowly came to a stop, noticing that he had passed the blonde Slayer. Turning back to the second-generation Slayer, Hadrian couldn't help but snored at the look of shock on Laxus' face. What do you mean, heat? Laxus asks, stuttering slightly. Heat. All Dragon Slayers go into heat upon reaching the age of 15, Hadrian answers, crossing his arms over his chest. The blonde Slayer frowned, looking down at the ground wide with a confused look in his eyes. Why are you telling me this now? The young Dragon Slayer couldn't help but ask. A small smile made its way onto Hadrian's face as an unknown glint shined in his eyes. Because you decided to not read up on Slayers when receiving the Lacrima. So now you get to know that little tidbit about Dragon Slayers and have to worry about what else Slayers have to go through until you read up on them, Hadrian says, his smile turning into a toothed grin. What? What else is there? Laxus demanded, slightly fearful as to what the lacrima within him was doing to his body. At that moment, Laxus stiffened, eyes narrowing as he got into a fighting stance. We got company, Laxus growls. Trusting his fellow Slayer's instincts and senses, Hadrian drew his sword and got into a fighting stance. The ground began to rumble, and from the dirt, a large centipede shot out. Scree! The centipede screeched as it flew through the air, moving towards Hadrian with incredible speed. Grinning sadistically, Hadrian jumped to the side, lifting his sword up and watched as the blade pierced the side of the centipede just as it dug back into the ground. Ah, nice one, Laxus yelled out, seeing the young Devil Slayer's sword pierce the centipede. Feeling the ground rumble beneath them as the centipede traveled through the dirt, Laxus felt the rumbling increase as the centipede moved closer. Narrowing his eyes, Laxus' pupils became slitted as he jumped back, the centipede bursting out of the ground and flying towards the young Dragon Slayer. Lightning body, Laxus yelled as his body was engulfed in golden lightning right before the young teen shot forward like a bullet, hitting the giant centipede in the face, knocking the creature, of course, and further into the air. Hit him now? Laxus roared, his Slayer instincts telling him to trust his fellow Slayer. Hadrian cackled as he brought his left arm back, light blue fire engulfing his arm. Hellfire Demon, Destruction Fist. Hadrian roared as he lunged forward, hitting the centipede with a devastating uppercut. Laxus watched with dark amusement as the centipede screeched as it flew into the air, its body flailing around while in the air. Boom! The creature landed on the ground with a loud boom. Unmoving. Dead. Not bad. Not bad at all. Laxus couldn't help but compliment the young boy, watching as he sheathed Armageddon. The young Devil Slayer chuckled as he crossed his arms, amusement shining in his eyes. What can I say? I am good, Hadrian says cockily, causing Laxus to chuckle and roll his eyes, amused by the young boy's antics. So that's it then? We just head back and get our reward? Hadrian asks, curious. Laxus nodded his head in confirmation. Yep, nothing much to it now, Laxus says, slightly happy that their mission was a quick and easy one. Just then the ground shook, causing both Laxus and Hadrian to look at each other, eyes wide. Freak! Both Slayers cursed just as the ground beneath them collapsed, causing the both of them to fall down. Thud! Both Hadrian and Laxus land on the ground with a painful thud, causing the both of them to groan from the impact. I have had many bad landings, but that was probably the most unexpected one. Hadrian joked slightly, pushing himself up to his feet. Laxus couldn't help but snort at that as he sat up, looking around with a frown on his face. Well, unexpected is certainly one way to say it, Laxus thought out loud as he stood up, looking around with narrowed eyes. Oh shit, the words came out of Laxus' mouth before he could even think. Frowning slightly, Hadrian cursed as he realized what the two slayers found themselves in. A centipede den, with many centipedes surrounding them. This just got a whole lot more difficult, both Hadrian and Laxus thought to themselves as they moved. With Makarov, from what little the master of fairy tale was able to learn from the many books on the slayers, was that out of all the three slayers, true devil slayers were considered the most dangerous. Despite not having as much power compared to the average slayer devil, slayers make it up with their demon form and their abilities. What their abilities were, Makarov could not find. It was almost as if they were afraid of people learning of their powers. Whether that was to avoid people pursuing the magic that devil slayers use, or to make sure that no one would counter their abilities, Makarov was not certain. But from what the elder man was able to learn from the few books that did mention them, the slayers were cautious among true devil slayers. Back with Laxus and Hadrian Scree, Hadrian jumped into the air, landing on top of a lunging centipede, with Armageddon drawn. Hadrian raised the sword high and stabbed the creature near the hand, the blade piercing through the skin and into the centipede. Burn! Hadrian growled as Armageddon was ignited, blue flames burning the inside of the giant centipede. With one last screech, the centipede exploded in bright blue flames. Laxus growled as he ducked, avoiding another lunging centipede as it flew over his head. Quickly pulling his fist back, Laxus' arm was engulfed in golden lightning. Lightning Dragon. Iron Fist, Laxus roared, striking a nearby centipede, the electricity surging throughout the centipede body as it slumped forward, steam coming off its body. Hadrian snarled as fire covered his arm, the fire beginning to grow darker as the young devil slayer's anger grew. Hellfire Demon. Destruction Fist, Hadrian roared, smashing his fist into the head of another centipede, crushing the giant creature's head with a loud splat. Laxus growled as he jumped back, dodging a centipede just as it landed in his position, digging itself back into the ground, shaking the ground as several centipedes began to overwhelm the two slayers. Do you know how to roar? Hadrian yells out, jumping to the side as he feels the ground rumble beneath him, just as a centipede bursts out of the ground, soaring through the air before burrowing into the dirt once more. What? What do you mean, roar? Laxus yells out, confused by the young devil slayer's question. Both dragon slayers and god slayers have a breath attack that is one of their signature moves. It is powerful and easy to control. Hadrian yells out as he jumps back as a centipede bursts from the ground and soaring through the sky. Hadrian let out a pained grunt as the centipede's body struck Hadrian, sending the dark-haired boy flying back, rolling across the ground. How do I do that? Laxus yells, just as he dodges another centipede lunge. Hold your breath in and focus your magic into your belly before breathing it out. The young devil slayer yells out as he is kicked up, landing on his feet just as another centipede bursts from the ground, soaring through the air. Clenching his fist, Hadrian's leg was covered in fire as pulled back. Hellfire Demon. Devastation Talon. Hadrian jumped into the air, kicking one of the centipede, flinging the large creature into the air, the force of the kick tearing the centipede in half. Laxus dropped to the ground, narrowly avoiding a centipede as it flew above him, burrowing back into the ground. Quickly concentrating, Laxus focused his magic into his belly, feeling the magic pool within. Lightning Dragon. Roar with a loud roar. Golden lightning shot from Laxus' mouth, the electricity surging through the area as multiple bolts of lightning struck any centipede unfortunate enough to be near the magical attack. Laxus stared in awe at his attack. A laugh escaped the young teen as he had just succeeded in killing many of the centipedes surrounding the duo. Yes! How was that? The blonde dragon slayer yells out, proud of himself for learning a new spell. Unseen by Laxus, a centipede bursts out of the ground, soaring through the air towards the young dragon slayer. Laxus! Hadrian yelled, pushing the young dragon slayer out of the way as a centipede narrowly misses the blonde teen as it burrows back into the ground. Laxus stares wide-eyed, shocked at how close he was nearly hit. As Laxus looks at Hadrian, the young teen's blood froze. Right below Hadrian's shoulder, blood dripped down from his left shoulder. But it was not the blood that horrified Laxus, but the fact that Hadrian's arm was now missing, blood dripping down from where the young devil slayer's arm once was. Laxus stuttered, unable to speak the young devil slayer's name as his eyes stared at the bone sticking out of Hadrian's shoulder where his arm once was. Scree! From the ground, a centipede burst out of the dirt, blood covering its face. Hadrian snarled as dark blue fire covered his body. The heat coming off of the flames was hotter than the one that Hadrian used. At that moment, Hadrian pulled his left shoulder back and Laxus watched in shock and awe as he saw the muscle and bone begin to move out of Hadrian's shoulder, forming itself into a brand new arm. As the centipede reached Hadrian, his arm had returned. "You took my arm. Your ass is mine." Hellfire demon, destruction fist. Hadrian struck the centipede, the fire consuming the centipede, leaving not even ash behind. Looking around, Hadrian growled as he felt the vibrations beneath the ground slowly stop, causing the young devil slayer to clench both hands, one of which still held Armageddon. "They got away," the dark-haired boy snarled, sheathing his sword within its scabbard. "We took out a nest of centipedes, more than what the job asked for. But they won't be coming back, that's for sure," Hadrian says out loud, looking at what remained of the centipede nest. Laxus was unable to speak, his eyes focused on Hadrian's newly regenerated arm, disbelief all over his face. Hadrian sighed and shook his head, irritated, knowing that with human greed involved they wouldn't be getting paid extra. Turning to his fellow slayer, Hadrian frowned as he noticed the shocked look on Laxus' face. "Yo, Blondie, you okay?" Hadrian asks, crossing his arms over his chest. This brings the blonde dragon slayer to reality. As he looks up at the young devil slayer, Laxus couldn't help but wonder if what he saw was just his imagination, that the arm that was torn off of the young boy's body was just his eyes playing with him. But then the blonde noticed the blood his shoulder. "So my eyes weren't messing with me," the blonde dragon slayer mumbled to himself. Hadrian frowned, looking at Laxus with a confused expression. "Excuse me?" Hadrian asks, unable to hear what the blonde teen had said. "Your arm," Laxus spoke, his eyes moving towards Hadrian's new arm. "I saw it ripped off." "So how did it heal? And so fast?" Hadrian frowned in confusion. It took only a few moments before realization settled in. "All right, I had forgotten that you guys can't heal like true devil slayers can. One of the things about us slayers is that we all have faster healing than normal people. Only devil slayers take it to the next level. We can heal bones, muscles, and even entire limbs and organs within seconds. Of course, we need the magic to do so, but that's what makes us so dangerous. We can't be brought down easily," Hadrian says with a smirk on his face. Laxus couldn't help but ponder on the information that the young devil slayer provided, the memory of the lack of arm on Hadrian's body coming back. But one thing stood out for the blonde dragon slayer. Why did it seem like losing an arm didn't hurt him? "Time skip, I see. Congratulations, you two, for a job well done," Makarov says with a smile, sitting before both Hadrian and Laxus. Both slayers had successfully completed their mission and returned to the mayor, only to receive the 350,000 jewels despite having taken out a nest of centipedes. Bastard said that since we got ourselves into the nest, that they shouldn't pay for our mistakes despite the fact that the centipede was a part of the nest, Hadrian thought with a scowl on his face. Makarov turned his attention to Hadrian, who stood there, arms crossed and annoyance prominent on his face. "Since you had proven yourself to be able to handle B-class quests, you will be able to do C and above quests by yourself. But for the time being, B-class quests are available to you should you bring someone along," Makarov says, causing the young devil slayer to raise an eyebrow. "And why not? We took out a nest of centipedes. I would say that would be a class at least, so why can't I go solo on B-class quests?" Hadrian asks, confused. "The old man wants to make sure you stay safe," Laxus says, cutting in on the conversation between both the master of fairy tale and their new devil slayer. Makarov turned to Laxus, nodding his head in confirmation. "That is correct. You may be able to handle B-class quests on your own, maybe even a class, but I would rather you get more experience before I allow you to do so, the old man says, taking a sip of his beer. Hadrian sighed but nodded his head, knowing that there would be no point in arguing. Like when Lilith wouldn't allow me to train by myself when I was still young, the young Devil Slayer thought to himself. Homes and new member. Chapter 4. Homes and new member. Hadrian smiled as he stood before his new home. It has been a month since the young Devil Slayer has joined Fairy Tail, and after some time, he was able to gain enough experience, in Makarov's opinion, to be able to go solo on B-class quests, something that the young dark-haired boy was grateful for. At the edge of the mountains on the outskirts of Magnolia, Hadrian was able to hire some people to build his home. It is a large two-story house on the side of the mountains, supported underneath the house, attached to the mountain itself, holding the entire thing up. Made of a mix of stone and wood. The home was beautiful, with a large balcony on the side with the side extended outwards, connecting to a nearby waterfall, where a pool and bath were located. Overall, the place was large, comfortable, and beautiful. A whistle was heard as Hadrian felt a hand grasp his shoulder. I gotta give it to you. You know how to pick a nice place, Laxus, the blonde dragon slayer says, looking up at the young devil slayer's home in awe. Yeah, far enough away from humans, and I can take advantage of the terrain, Hadrian says with an amused gleam in his eyes. A laugh escaped Laxus as he shook his head. Good to know. Maybe I should crash here if I ever need to just get away from everybody, the blonde teen says with a slight chuckle at the end. Sure, if you want. It's big enough to fit a total of 7 people comfortably, so if being around other people becomes too much, then sure, feel free to come over. I even have a training area, should you want to train, Hadrian says, looking at Laxus, amused at the surprised expression on the dragon slayer's face. Oh, thanks, man. I'll think about it, Laxus says, surprised by his fellow slayer's offer. Hadrian shrugged and turned back towards his new house. Suit yourself, man, the dark-haired boy replied. Laxus looked up at Hadrian's house and couldn't help but feel a little jealous at the extravagant home. How did you get that house built anyway? It must have cost a fortune to do this, Laxus couldn't help but ask. Hadrian snorted and shook his head. It certainly was expensive. The materials were a pain along with the help, but 90% of most house costs is actually the land. With the fact that I am far enough away from Magnolia, this place was pretty much free. Just had to have the place under my name, pay a minor fee, and tada, the place is mine. Of course, while we were mining into the mountain for more room, we ended up finding some gems and jewels, so that certainly reduced the cost by quite a bit, Hadrian states, crossing his arms over his chest. Laxus couldn't help but nod in approval. Out of all the kids in Fairy Tail, Hadrian was the only one that Laxus found himself comfortable around. Not only was Hadrian more mature than the others around him, but he also saw Laxus as his own person, not as the grandson of Makarov, the guild master. It also helped that the dark-haired boy helped train his slayer magic. Hey, I got to go. Me and my dad are heading out on a quest soon, Laxus says, turning to the young devil slayer. Raising an eyebrow at that, Hadrian was slightly confused at the sudden behavior of Laxus' father, who for all intents and purposes was an A-grade asshole, believing himself to be the top dog despite being just a little bit more powerful than Hadrian in his human form and considerably weaker than Hadrian in his demon form. Best of luck, man. I'll see you later, Hadrian says as Laxus nods, turning around and heading off to find his father. Age 11. Bending down on one knee, Hadrian grasped a stone tablet from the ground, a frown marring his face. The young devil slayer let out a growl of frustration as he stood back up, tablet in hand. It has been a year since the young male Potter joined Fairy Tail, and he certainly has changed as the year had passed. Now with longer hair reaching down to his shoulder and more toned muscles from training, the young devil slayer found himself within the laboratory of a dark wizard, one who had seemed to have the desire to follow in Xer's footsteps and bring about an entirely new race of monsters. As the young devil slayer inspected the markings on the tablet, he couldn't help but wonder about its use. Understanding nothing of what the markings meant or used for, Hadrian felt himself wondering if he should take this back with him to Fairy Tail. I'm certain Levy would have a field day with trying to understand this, Hadrian thought, placing the tablet in his backpack, turning back to the current situation in hand. Tied in his chair, a no-named wizard looked up at Hadrian with fear in his eyes. The fear causes Hadrian to grin as he walks towards the wizard. Now, don't be afraid. I'm just going to ask you a few questions, and then, when you answer them, I will give you to the Rune Knights, the young devil slayer says with a dark smile. The dark wizard shook with fear as he felt the darkness weigh down on him, but still had some determination in him. Never! The wizard snapped. Hadrian looked down at the wizard, the darkness growing as his eyes slowly gained a silver tinge to it, the wizard's vision soon being consumed by the darkness. Break! A groan escaped the dark wizard as his eyes slowly opened, only to see the ground hundreds of feet below him. Ah! The wizard began to scream, flinging his arms around as he searched for a way to avoid splatting on the ground. I want answers, and you are going to answer them. Hadrian's voice brought the wizard out of his panic as he looked down, only to realize that he was upside down, held from the leg with a single arm. The moon glowing behind Hadrian as his emerald green, silver-tinged eyes looked down at the dark wizard. Ah! Leave me alone! The dark wizard howls, struggling to escape Hadrian's grasp, forgetting that the Devil Slayer was the only reason he wasn't dead. Where did you get Xerxes' research? Hadrian demanded, tightening his grip around the wizard's leg. Ah! I will never tell you. Let go of me, you stupid freaking kid. The dark wizard snapped, glaring up at the young boy. If you insist, Hadrian growled, then released his grip on the dark wizard's leg. Ah! The dark wizard screamed, his voice slowly fading as he fell further and further down. Splat! The sound of the dark wizard's body hitting the ground echoed through the night, something that didn't bother the young devil slayer at all. Good riddance, Hadrian thought with a scowl as he looked down at the corpse of the dark wizard, blood staining the ground beneath him. Break! Hadrian sighed as he stepped off of the train. Now back in Magnolia, Hadrian yawned as he raised his arms, stretching out his joints from his long ride. Might as well get back to the guild hall. Levy might be there, so I should probably give that to her for research, Hadrian thought to himself as he began making his way towards the guild hall. Upon reaching Fairy Tale, Hadrian frowned as he noticed something off. As the young devil slayer opened the door, the young boy was surprised to see that it was quiet, completely different from the normal loud and trouble-causing guild members. Now that is odd. Wonder what's going on, Hadrian thought to himself as he made his way inside. From the kids' table, Kana smiled as she made her way to the resident devil slayer. Oh, hey Harry, how have you been? Kana asks with a bright smile. Hadrian grunted as he looked around, searching for Levy. I've been quite well. Hey, is Levy around? Hadrian asks with a raised eyebrow. Kana shook her head in response. No, Levy went on a request with Jet and Droy. I don't think they will be back for a while, Kana answers, causing the young devil slayer to let out a sigh of frustration. Of course she is, Hadrian grumbled as he shook his head. Ah, Harry, how have you been, my child? The voice of Makarov gained Hadrian's attention, causing the young devil slayer to turn to the guild master of Fairy Tale. Well enough, I would say, Hadrian answers as he makes his way towards the old man. Pulling the tablet that he had retrieved from the dark wizard out of his bag, Hadrian handed the item in question to Makarov, causing the old man to raise a questioning eyebrow. Found this in a dark wizard's laboratory. Seems the bastard intended to follow in Xerxes' footsteps. Hadrian answers the guild master's unspoken question. As Xerxes' name was spoken, the atmosphere darkened as those near the devil slayer shivered at the name of the most infamous dark wizard. I must admit, the fact that there is still some out there that aspire to be like Xerxes worries me. But I must congratulate you on a job well done. I must admit, you are incredibly powerful for your age, my boy, Makarov says with a smile. I'll say, kid's already an A-class wizard. Not too far from the duo, Macau spoke, causing both the resident devil slayer and the guild master to turn their attention to the wizard. Indeed, Hadrian is an incredibly skilled and powerful young man, on his way to becoming an S-class wizard, Makarov answers, causing Macau to chuckle and nod his head in agreement. Oh, hello there, Kana greets, causing everyone to turn in the direction of Kana, where she stood before a young dark-haired boy. If one were to look between both Hadrian and the young boy, many would have believed that the both of them were related in some way. Hello, my name is Grateful Buster. I wanted to ask if I could join the guild. The kid, now introduced as Gray, yelled out, in the hopes that the master of the guild would hear the young boy's request. Luckily for Gray, the master did indeed hear him. With a smile on his face, Makarov hopped off of the bar and made his way towards the dark-haired boy. "Well, it is nice to meet you, Gray. I am Makarov, the master of this lovely guild," Makarov introduced himself. Gray blinked as he looked at the small, elderly man before him. "You're the guild master?" Gray asked, unable to hide his disbelief. Quickly realizing his mistake, Gray's eyes widened as he covered his mouth with both hands, fear present on the young boy's face. Everything was silent. Ah! Only for it to be broken by Hadrian's laugh. A tick mark formed on Makarov's face as he knew that the young devil slayer was messing with him by laughing. This little brat, Makarov thought, his head slowly turning to Hadrian, who merely grinned at the guild master. "Do not make me come over there, Hadrian," Makarov warned, though the smile present on his face showed that he wasn't insulted or angry. In response, Hadrian merely cackled, causing the old man to chuckle as he shook his head with an amused smile. "Now, Gray, what type of magic do you dash?" Makarov froze as he turned to Gray. In fact, even Hadrian paused as he saw what happened. Now standing before the guild master, Gray was suddenly in his boxers, clothes lying on the floor. Everything was silent as everyone stared at Gray, disbelief across all of their faces. I'm sorry, but what the freak just happened?" Hadrian's voice cut through the silence. Gray blinked as he looked at everyone. That's when he realized the problem. "Ah, not again!" Gray yelled as he looked down, seeing his clothes littered across the floor. Hadrian raised an eyebrow as he slowly made his way to Makarov, the old man frozen stiff. "You all right there, old man?" Hadrian asks, hints of worry in his voice. The guild master stood there, frozen, eyes wide with horror. "I got flashed," Makarov mumbled to himself. Hadrian blinked as he looked down at the old man. "And it wasn't even by a woman," Makarov yelled out as he fell to the ground, sobbing as tears spewed from his eyes. Hadrian sighed as he shook his head, disappointed in the guild master. Of course the old man would be upset by that. Crazy, perverted bastard. If he acts like that, I can only wonder what he would be like if he learned that I'm mated with Lilith, Hadrian thought, a shiver running down his spine at the thought of Makarov's reaction at learning that the resident devil slayer was in fact not a virgin. Sitting in the large bath in the backyard of his home, Hadrian let out a relaxed sigh as he leaned back, looking up at the open sky. Washing off the sweat and dirt that he had picked up during his travel, Hadrian felt the warm water wash over his body. As the young devil slayer looked up at the sky, he saw the sun slowly beginning to rise across the horizon. Letting a tired groan, Hadrian stepped out of the bath, grabbing a towel and drying himself off. The bath area was massive, with a beautiful view and a waterfall close by. Overall, the place was a sight to behold. Putting his clothes on, Hadrian opened the front door to his home and made his way down the many stairs, making his way towards Magnolia. The young potter yawned as he reached the guild hall and opened the door to see the guild in the middle of a brawl. The devil slayer sighed as he shook his head. Of course they are fighting. When are they not? Hadrian thought as he entered the guild, dodging the flying tables, bottles, and people, making his way towards the bar, sitting down on a stool beside Makarov. "Good morning, my child. How was your night?" the guild master asked with a warm smile. Hadrian hummed as the bartender came to Hadrian, handing the young boy a chocolate milkshake. "Not bad. It was nice to sleep in my bed again instead of the hard ground in the middle of the forest," Hadrian answers as he takes a sip of his chocolate. The old man nodded his head in understanding, chuckling slightly as he had a look of nostalgia. "I remember when I wasn't the master of fairy tale. Going out on missions, camping out with the stars over your head. No worry about paperwork," Makarov says with a dreamy sigh. Hadrian chuckled as he shook his head with an amused smile. "Gray, your clothes," Hadrian heard Kana say, causing the young devil slayer to see the new member of Fairy Tale, running around and looking for his clothes. "I feel like this is going to be a common occurrence," Hadrian commented. Makarov made a noise of agreement as he took a sip of his beer. "As long as he doesn't flash me again, then I will be fine and dandy," Makarov says. Hadrian cackled as he turned back around, placing both arms on the bar. "So what's the new kid's magic?" Hadrian asks, curious. Makarov sipped his beer as he leaned back against the wall. He uses ice make magic, a pretty versatile magic that allows the individual to create anything with us with only their imagination as their limit, Makarov answers. Hadrian made a noise of interest before drinking his milkshake. Hey Harry, Makarov says, causing the young devil slayer to turn to the guild master with a raised eyebrow. Yeah, Hadrian asks, interested in what the old man wanted. I know you typically work alone, with only that one mission with Laxus being the exception. But is it fine if you would occasionally go on quests with the children so that I don't have to worry about them when they go on the more dangerous quests? Makarov asks, hopeful. Hadrian cocks his head to the side, a frown prominent on his face. How come you're asking me? I'm pretty sure there are others in this guild that are a better option than me. Hadrian asks, curious. Makarov nodded his head as he looked down at his mug. True. You are not the most social person in the guild, but you are among the strongest. I was able to locate a tome on true devil slayers and learned that you all have demonic healing, allowing you to heal limbs in seconds. Should any of the children get into any danger, I know you will be able to protect them, even if you get hurt, Makarov answers. Hadrian sighed as he looked down at his drink. On the one hand, Hadrian was happy that the guild master trusted him enough for such things. But on the other, Hadrian wasn't exactly the most thrilled with having to go on quests with other people. The last time he did that was with Laxus, and that nearly went to shit. Fine, but please don't make it a habit and have everyone asking me to join them for every little thing, the young devil slayer says with a pleading look. Makarov snorted, but nodded his head. That is fine, my dear child. I only intended to ask you to go on dangerous quests. Not very dangerous to go find flowers on the outskirts of town, Makatov jokes, causing Hadrian to growl. One of the quests on the board that the resident devil slayer found one day was to find a bunch of flowers on the outskirts of Magnolia. Upon seeing it, a few members of Fairy Tale teased Hadrian on wanting to go and pick some flowers, sending the devil slayer into a rage as he threw those members across the guild hall. It was honestly quite an amusing sight, as the young potter never actually got involved in a brawl, let alone started. So, Kana says you are the strongest of the kids here, right? The voice of Gray brought Hadrian out of his thoughts, causing the young boy to turn to see Gray, standing there, with no pants and only an underwear and shirt on. Where the freak are your pants? Hadrian asks, confused. Gray blinked, then looked down. Where are my pants? Gray screamed as he ran around. Makarov cackled in amusement, happy that it was not him this time that got flashed. We're back, a voice announced, causing everyone to turn and see a young blue-haired girl walk in, with two familiar boys following right behind her. Looks like Levy is back, Hadrian thought, as the young girl walked up to Guild Master with a smile on her face. Mission completed, Master, Levy announced happily. Makarov chuckled as he sipped his beer. That is good to hear, my dear. I hope that there weren't too many problems? Makarov asks. Levy shook her head in response. Not at all. It was actually pretty fun, Levy says with a bright smile. Makarov chuckles as he looks over Levy's shoulder, inspecting both Jet and Droy. And what about you two? Had fun? The guild master asks. Immediately both boys nodded their heads, goofy smiles on their faces. Yep, we helped Levy a lot. The boys cheered. Levy laughed, though the expression on her face made the young devil slayer doubt the two boys' statement. It is good that you are back. Levy, Hadrian has recently brought back a tablet from a dark wizard laboratory. After checking it over, I am able to confirm that there is no magic, dark or otherwise, connected to this. I hope you are willing to translate it for both me and Hadrian, Makarov requests, handing the stone tablet to the young brunette. Blinking in surprise, Levy grasped the tablet and looked down at the symbols inscribed into the stone. The young girl hummed in thought as she tilted her head. I have never seen this type of symbol before. It's going to take a while to even begin finding where it originates from, Levy informs both Hadrian and Makarov. The young devil slayer grunted as he uncaringly waved his hand. Don't sweat it. It's not like I need it translated now. As long as you can figure it out, then I don't really mind, the young potter says, finishing the rest of his milkshake. Levy smiled and nodded her head. I won't let you down, Harry, the young brunette says, giving the resident devil slayer a thumbs up. Nodding to the young girl, Hadrian made his way towards the mission board, inspecting it for any requests of interest. "Oh, welcome back, you two." The voice of the bartender caught Hadrian's attention, causing the young boy to turn and see Laxus walk into the guild, a tall man by his side. The man was tanned with dark hair and a unique-looking beard. Overall, the man's demeanor and very presence sent warning bells ringing inside the young Devil Slayer's head. As the duo walked towards the bar, the man stopped before Makarov, looking down at the guild master. "Father," the man greets with a nod. Ivan Makarov greeted back, acknowledging his son. "So Lax's father is back, huh? I don't really like him," Hadrian thought, narrowing his eyes at the man. Without another word, Ivan turned around and began making his way out of the guild, not giving anyone a glance. "He's always like that," Kana was heard, informing Gray of the son of the guild master. "How have you been, Hadrian?" Laxus asks, making his way towards his fellow slayer. Hadrian grunted in greeting as he turned back to the quest board, searching for a mission to do. "I looked up some more on slayers. I wasn't aware that there was a specific greeting that slayers use upon meeting each other," Laxus says, leaning against the frame of the quest board. Hadrian chuckled as he shook his head. "That greeting, as you called it, is just a formality, something to be used in a more formal setting." Hadrian answers as he grabs a request, inspecting it further. The blonde dragon slayer blinked before sighing as he rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Of course it is. How much else do I need to study? I've been looking through books nonstop for the past year," Laxus asks, annoyed. A snort escaped Hadrian as a grin forced its way into Hadrian's face. "It took me years to understand the culture and customs of all three slayers. You just know the basics on devil and god slayers, and you need to fully understand dragon slayers," the young devil slayer informs the blonde teen, causing him to let out a frustrated breath. "Of course I do," Laxus grumbled. Chuckling, Hadrian placed the request back onto the board and sighed. "Nothing of interest. They are all taken by the others, leaving only fetch quests," Hadrian grumbled. Laxus snorted and raised an eyebrow. "I'm pretty sure you were the one who took all the good ones. You go on a mission every 3 days," Laxus says with an amused grin on his face. Hadrian cocked an eyebrow as he looked at Laxus with an odd expression on his face. "What do you mean?" the young devil slayer asks, confused. The blonde dragon slayer laughed, shaking his head as he found himself amused by his fellow slayer's confusion. "Most of Fairy Tale go on a mission, like once a week. You take it whenever you can. How much money do you even have?" Laxus asks, curious. Hadrian closed his eyes as he hummed, counting in his head. "Well, I got 750,000 jewels for that salamander that was attacking a village. 325,000 for taking out the group of C-class dark wizards within a stronghold. And recently, I got 500,000 for taking out a B-class dark wizard in a castle," Hadrian answers. Laxus stared at Hadrian, owlishly blinking at the devil slayer. "Dude, you don't have to pay rent, have your own house, and you have that much money, and you still want to do more missions?" the blonde teen asks, surprised. Hadrian just shrugged his shoulders in response. Laxus groaned as he face-palmed. "Forget it. So do you have any books I could borrow about the other slayers and their traditions?" Laxus asks. Hadrian nodded his head in confirmation. "I do, but it will be a day's journey," Hadrian warned. Laxus frowned and raised an eyebrow. "I am fine with a day of traveling. But where would we be going?" Laxus asked, curious. Hadrian breathed in as he looked up at Laxus. "My old home," the young potter answered. "Back on Earth," Lily cried as she looked down at the moving photo of her son along with her and James, her son small and adorable as he smiled happily, clapping his hands as a multicolored ball floated above him. The beautiful red-haired woman let out a watery laugh as she saw Harry turn to his father, grasping the man's cheek and pulling. It was one of the happiest days of Lily's life, married to the love of her life, and with their adorable son, so joyful and happy. But Voldemort had to ruin that. Feeling the rage inside her, Lily closed her eyes as tears slid down her cheek. It has been over 6.5 years since she had last seen her son, and he would have been turning 8 soon. "Where are you, my baby boy?" Lily thought, holding the picture close to her chest. Not too far from Lily, James watched as his wife held onto the picture tightly, never wanting to let it go. James was many things: immature, goofy, a little lazy, but he was not a bad father or an uncaring man. He loved his firstborn son and would have gladly died for Hadrian to love. But the decision to go into hiding underneath the wards was the most difficult decision he had ever had to make. Not only would he have missed 3 years of his son's life, but he would not be able to watch the child's first steps and first words. If James were to be honest, if he would have known this would have been the result of his decisions, he would have probably never hid under the wards. Back to Earthland, Hadrian sighed as he walked through a forest, Laxus not too far behind him. It felt nostalgic to be in the forest located near his home of 9 years. To think it has been 10 years since Lilith raised me, Hadrian thought, a small smile worming its way onto Hadrian's lips. Are we there yet? Laxus asked for the 6th time. Hadrian growled as he rubbed the bridge of his nose. I swear, Laxus. You ask one more time, I am throwing you there. Hadrian snapped. The blonde dragon slayers cackled, enjoying how much he annoyed his fellow slayer. Now I know why kids do it so much, Laxus thought, with a shit-eating grin. Hadrian let out a relieved sigh as the duo had finally exited the forest. Damn, is it just me or is it getting hot here? Laxus asks, pulling on his collar as sweat slowly begins to drip down Laxus' body. Hadrian grinned, knowing that the two were getting close to his old home. Then that means we're almost there, Hadrian says as he began to continue to make his way towards his old home. Laxus sighed as he sped up, trying to keep up with the Devil Slayer, who seemed to be moving slightly faster as they got closer to the heat. After a minute, Laxus frowned as he found himself jogging after Hadrian, despite the fact that the Devil Slayer was still walking. Okay, how are you doing that? Laxus asks, noticing that the young potter was moving faster. It's quite simple, that Hadrian says as he points in the direction of his home. Laxus blinked as he looked in the direction, only for his jaw to drop as he saw a massive volcano, fire shooting out from the top as rumbled. Is that a freaking volcano? The blonde screams out in shock, having not noticed the massive volcano that was on the verge of blowing. Yep, and my home is over there, Hadrian says, pointing towards a home near the volcano. What? You live near a volcano? Laxus exclaims in shock and disbelief. Yep, Hadrian answers as he walks towards his home. Laxus frowns before letting out a whine as he realized that he was going to have to get closer to the massive volcano, filled to the brim with magma. I'm not going to get used to the ridiculousness that his hairy, bloody Potter, Laxus thought as he wiped sweat off of his face. Break! Damn, why is it so hot in here? Laxus asks, wiping his forehead, his clothes now drenched in sweat. From the kitchen, Hadrian chuckled. The volcano, for starters. But if it's so bad here, Hadrian says as he flicks a switch. The effect was immediate as cool air filled the room. The blonde dragon slayer let out a sigh of relief, grateful for the cool air. How did you do that? The teen asks, curious. Hadrian chuckled as he walked to the living room, sitting down on the couch. Lilith traveled throughout the multiverse, so she was able to learn all types of magic and find books. We have a massive library filled with lost and ancient magic. I have yet to actually go through them, as there is too many to choose from and require magic that are far beyond my current power, Hadrian answers. Laxus blinked and gaped at his fellow slayer. The multiverse theory is real? The blonde teen asked, shocked. The young devil slayer nodded his head in confirmation. Yep, when we had our break, we can start going through the library, Hadrian says as he laid down, letting out a relaxed sigh. Laxus rubbed his forehead, getting rid of the accumulated sweat as he sat down on the couch. Let's hope the library isn't too big, the blonde dragon slayer hoped. Break! What the freak? Laxus exclaimed as he saw the library. Rows and rows of shelves can be seen, as they all were as tall as a double-story house. How come this wasn't seen outside of your house? Laxus yelled in shock. Hadrian cackled, enjoying the look of shock on his fellow slayer's face. Lilith traveled the multiverse, remember? That means she eventually learned how to create a pocket dimension and connect it to a door in our house, Hadrian says in amusement. Laxus looked at the many books filling the bookshelves, shocked at the sheer quantity of them. All right, I don't remember where the Earthland books are, so we have to start looking, Hadrian says as he goes to the nearest book. Laxus turned to Hadrian, wide-eyed. What do you mean you don't know where they are? Look how many books there are. How are we going to find it? Laxus exclaimed, raising his arms up, gesturing to the many books. Hadrian snorted and shook his head. Relax. They are all grouped together based on the universe they originate from, the young devil slayer says as he looks at the title of the first book before heading towards a ladder, looking up at the many books above it. Laxus sighed as he shook his head. This is going to take a long time, Laxus thought as he looked at the first book, blinking at the title. The Legendary Super Scion. Odd title, but whatever, Laxus thought to himself as he moved to the next bookshelf. The Dark Knight Sparta. That actually sounds pretty interesting, Laxus thought as he quickly shook his head, focusing on the task at hand. Holy Knight of Britannia. The 8 Deadly Sins. This one actually caused the blonde dragon slayer to freeze. Looking back, Laxus saw his fellow slayer on top of the ladder, nearly reaching the ceiling as he looked at the titles of the books. Turning back to the book, Laxus grabbed the book in question and looked at the cover. Standing in unique armor, Laxus looked to see a massive behemoth in purple armor, a beautiful 40-foot giant with brown pigtails and a massive warhammer, a black-haired woman floating through the air, an orb circling around her, a massive man with ginger hair, a golden one-handed axe rested against his shoulder, a man with light blur hair and nunchucks between his arm, a young boy with golden hair and emerald green eyes, a sword in his left hand, and a large fat man as he hugged a pillow. All 7 of the 8 deadly sins were unique, but it was the 8th one that shocked Laxus. A young black-haired boy with messy hair, emerald green eyes, and a lightning bolt scar. Looking at the Devil Slayer, Laxus compared both the boy in the book and his fairy tale guild member. What? Laxus screamed out in shock, causing Hadrian to let out a yelp, losing his grip on the ladder. Thud. Ugh. Hadrian grunted as he slammed into the floor. Shaking his head, Hadrian looked up at Laxus with a confused expression on his face. What's wrong, Laxus? Why did you yell? Hadrian asked, confused. Look at this, Laxus exclaimed, shoving the book in the young devil slayer's face. Blinking in surprise, Hadrian grasped the book and had a closer look. Lo and behold, Hadrian saw a boy with the exact same appearance. Huh, that is odd, Hadrian says as he opens the book. Odd? What do you mean odd? Why didn't you tell me you were, but of a group of holy knights? What are holy knights? Laxus asks, curious. Hadrian hummed as he searched through the book. Don't really know. I'm looking for the kid that looks like me. Huh, here it is, Hadrian says triumphantly as he found the book on his look-alike. Huh, it says Hadrian Potter, the sin of imitation. The youngest of the 8 deadly sins. Hadrian wields the cursed sword Insidious, using its power to activate his magical ability, Demon's Wrath. Huh, so he must be one of my counterparts, Hadrian says, surprised. Laxus blinked at Hadrian, then let out a tired sigh. Mavis, help me, Laxus thought, praying to the founder of fairy tale. Time skip. Huh. Hadrian yelled out triumphantly as he found the books belonging to Earthland. Hearing the young devil slayer, Laxus turned to Hadrian to see him going through several books in search for any relating to slayers and their customs. Making his way towards his fellow slayer, Laxus frowned as he saw all manner of books, magic that the blonde teen never even heard of to the more advanced and rare magic such as void magic. Incredible, Laxus whispered in awe at the numerous books. A chuckle broke the blonde dragon slayer out of his hypnotized state, causing Laxus to turn to see Hadrian, looking at him with an amused expression. Trust me, Laxus, those types of magics require a lot of power. Stick with what you got now, then we will see if you can start learning these ones, Hadrian says as he pulls up a book, placing it in the teen's hands. Cocking an eyebrow at that, Laxus stored that information for the future and looked down to see the cover of the book. Standing side by side, a man with a dragon behind him stood in the center, while a woman with the image of one of the sea goddesses behind her with a man with dark wings sprouting from his back with an image of a demon behind him on the other side. As he looked at the cover, Laxus realized that the 3 people were the 3 different slayer types: dragon, god, and devil slayers. Incredible, Laxus thought in awe as he opened the book. After a few moments, Laxus froze and looked up at Hadrian, eyes wide with shock. What does it mean when it says all slayers can have mates? Laxus thought, shocked and confused. The Redhead. Chapter 5. The Redhead. Gray frowned as he sat beside Kana. The young ice magic user stared at the back of one Hadrian Potter, the resident Devil Slayer. Why does he always carry that sword? Gray asked the young card mage. The brown-haired girl made a noise in response, not really caring as to why the young Devil Slayer was always armed. I think it might have to do with his demon parent, Levy says, causing both Gray and Kana to turn to her. A dark expression formed on Gray's face at the mention of demon. Demon parent? Gray asks, eyes narrowed. Levy, not noticing the change in behavior, nodded her head. Yep, I found out that Harry is a Devil Slayer. So either he has a lacrima or he has a demon parent. And with that sword, I think it's the latter, Levy responds, turning her attention back to her book. Gray looked down, a scowl prominent on his face. Before becoming a member of Fairy Tale, Gray had lost his family to a demon who had rampaged his hometown, killing his family. From there, the young ice mage met his master. From there, Gray was trained in ice magic until Gray discovered that the same demon that had killed his family had been spotted. Filled with rage and desire for revenge, the young boy attempted to kill the demon, only to find himself too weak to do so. As a result, he had lost his master to the demon as she sacrificed herself to stop it. Standing up from his seat, Gray stormed over to Hadrian and grabbed his shoulder and pulled, forcing the young Devil Slayer to turn around. Bang! Gray had no time to react as he found his head smashed into the bar table. Hadrian's hand pressed against her skull. Now here's a lesson I guess I must teach you. I can be patient, I can be understanding, but do not, even for a moment, think that storming towards me and pulling me like that will be accepted. So you either get my attention like a normal person, or I will put you in your place. Is that clear? Hadrian growled. Gray remained silent until he winced as he felt Hadrian's grip tighten around his skull. Is that clear? Hadrian growled, unseen by many. The young Devil Slayer's nails grew slightly, partially resembling claws as the young Slayer's anger grew. Why yes, Gray stuttered, afraid that the young Potter would truly hurt him. With a slight huff, Hadrian released the ice mage as he took a step back, his nails going back to its previous state. Now, what did you come here for? Hadrian demanded, crossing his arms over his chest. Gray sighed as he rubbed his head, slightly pained by how hard the young Devil Slayer slammed his head. Levy says that you're a Devil Slayer. She said that because of that you might have had a lacrima or demon parent, Gray states, causing the young Devil Slayer to cock an eyebrow. That's it? You stormed over to me and grabbed my shoulder, just for that? Jeez. You're an idiot, Hadrian sighed, shaking his head in disappointment. And for your information, I am a true Devil Slayer. It is impossible to have a lacrima implanted in us, so yes, I had a demon guardian. Levy, who was paying attention to the conversation, frowned as she stood up, making her way to the duo with a confused expression on her face. What do you mean, demon guardian? Don't you mean parent? The young Bluenet asks, confused. Hadrian snorted as he shook his head. No. Lilith had no intention of having me seeing her as a parent, the young Devil Slayer says, causing both Gray and Levy to tilt their heads in confusion. Okay, now I am confused. What do you mean that the demon, Lilith? Levy cuts Gray off, causing the young boy to turn and glare at Levy, who looked away, whistling a tune. Asterisk sigh, asterisk Lilith. Didn't want you to see her as a parent? Gray asks, confused. When Lilith found me, she stole me from some old man with the intention to make me a Devil Slayer. Her reason for doing so was so that when I became older, I would be her mate, the young Devil Slayer answers bluntly. The effect was immediate as all around the guild hall, many members that were drinking did a spit take, looking at the young Devil Slayer in complete shock. What? The members of Fairy Tale yelled out in unison, surprising the young Potter, who was not aware that others were listening in. My boy, please do not be upset, but did you just say that Lilith not only kidnapped you, but basically groomed you to be her husband? Makarov asks, looking at the young Devil Slayer with worry. Hadrian stared at the old man and nodded his head in confirmation. Pretty much, yeah, the true Devil Slayer confirms, much to the shock of everyone. And you're just fine with that? Levy asks, a frown on her face. Hadrian cocked an eyebrow as he crossed his arms over his chest. Yeah, I am. Lilith never hid from me that she intended for me to be her mate, and she made sure that I always remembered it. It was just something I grew up with the knowledge of, the young Devil Slayer says, much to the confusion and worry of everyone else. That is wrong on so many levels, the guild members thought in unison. Break. Makarov frowned as he found himself in a massive library belonging to that of the Magic Council. Looking through the many books, the guild master let out a tired sigh as he read book after book, page after page, in search of anything relating to true Devil Slayers. Even in the massive library containing many books of ancient history and stories of many magic users, nearly none had contained information on true Devil Slayers. Those that did always warned others of their power. True Devil Slayers were far more ruthless than Dragon and God Slayers. In terms of sheer raw power, they are not as powerful as Dragon Slayers or God Slayers, but they make up for it with their incredible healing abilities, able to heal even the most life-threatening of wounds in seconds. True Devil Slayers are trained to the point where losing an arm is merely an inconvenience to them and continue on with the battle, making them far harder to restrain or take down. Each of the three Slayers have different types of training methods in the times of old. Dragon Slayers have the least intense of the three, having only focus on their inner dragon and the sheer raw power they contain. God Slayers focus on their divinity, the world around them, and their versatility in their magic. But true Devil Slayers have the hardest, focusing on their body, mind, magic, the world around them, and the demon within them. True Devil Slayers are trained intensely to the point where their nerves are burning and muscles are torn, constantly being healed by their magic. It was practically torture. True Devil Slayers have the most intense and painful training methods, causing them to surpass most Slayers due to their dedication and willpower to survive their training. But out of all the three Slayers, what makes history purposefully avoid even mentioning them is their sheer ruthlessness, strength of will, power, and also their precision. When being trained in their magic, all Devil Slayers are trained to keep their magic in complete control, making their very attacks far more concentrated and potent. With all of these factors plus their pain tolerance and demonic healing, true Devil Slayers were the pinnacle of being unstoppable. Perhaps they still are, Makarov thought to himself, recalling how the young Potter would come back to the guild, unharmed and completely fine, even in the worst A-class quests bordering onto S. Break. Sitting atop the mountain above his home, Hadrian took a deep breath as he relaxed his body and mind, focusing on the magic within him. Feeling the dark energy within him, the young Slayer allowed the cursed power to flow through his entire body, empowering him as flickers of dark blue flames formed across parts of his body, threatening to grow in size if not controlled. Taking another deep breath, Hadrian's eyes snapped open, revealing the young boy's emerald green eyes with dark web-like cracks across his sclera. Feeling all positive emotions become suppressed by his curse/magic, the young boy lifted his hand up and watched as dark blue flames ignited around his fist, threatening to burn anything in sight. "I have grown stronger," the young Devil Slayer spoke out loud before forcing his flames to burn out, leaving nothing but smoke behind as it vanished. Slowly, the young boy's eyes began to return to normal as the dark cracks faded away, leaving the young boy's eyes perfectly normal. Looking off to the side, the young Potter spotted his sword, laying against a rock, sheathed. "How long until you can no longer hold back my demon form?" The young boy wondered before sighing, standing up from his spot and making his way towards the sword and strapping it to his back. Might as well get some quests in, the true Devil Slayer thought to himself, tightening the strap of his scabbard. Break. Looking at the quest board, Hadrian sighed in frustration as he failed to find anything of interest, most being collection quests or guarding quests, none of which suit the Devil Slayer style. "You could try to do things other than kill quests," a voice spoke out, causing Hadrian to look to the side and see a familiar blunette. "I was trained as a Slayer Levy. Killing is what I do best, especially if they're demon-related," Hadrian states to the young girl. Sighing to herself, Levy shook her head with an unamused expression on her face. "That may be the case, but you also need to try other things. Maybe you will even like them," the young girl suggests, causing Hadrian to cock an eyebrow at the young girl. "I have tried a guarding quest before. I nearly throttled the bastard. Bloody arrogant piss ant," Hadrian growled at the last part. Levy blinked in surprise, but shook her head with a sigh. Fine, I guess that won't work for you. What about retrieval quests? I know you did one for the master, the young girl says, referring to the guild master. Hadrian took a deep breath as he found his frustrations growing. I only did it because we had suspicions that a dark wizard was doing some incredibly dark experiments. The job was to find the bastard, destroy his research, take him down, and find a stone tablet that he had taken. That's it, the young devil slayer states. Levy looked up at the older boy and shook her head. If you're going to be so stubborn, at least let me help you, the Bluinette says, causing Hadrian to pause. Excuse me? The true devil slayer asks, confusion evident in his voice. Rolling her eyes, Levy grabbed a book from her bag, shoving the title into Hadrian's face. Leaning his head back, the true devil slayer blinked as he looked at the title. Rune Beginnings. And why would I need this? The dark-haired boy asks with a raised eyebrow. Levy smugly grinned in response. Because 99% of the time you work alone, like you are one of the very few people that works alone. Hell, even Laxus works with people more than you do. Because of that, I decided I'm going to teach you runes. With that, if you find yourself in a situation where you are in a trap, you can use runes to escape, the young girl says proudly. Hadrian merely sighed as he rubbed the bridge of his nose. If I were to fall for something like that, I can just use my fires to burn the magic away. After all, despite calling it magic, it is still curse, magic's opposite. With that, all I had to do was focus on my curse, then corrupt and burn the magic away. Easy as that. Hadrian thought to himself before pausing. Magic is just like tools. The more you have and the more you master, the more versatile you become. The voice of Lilith echoed in Hadrian's mind, causing the young devil slayer to sigh. Och, you can teach me, the young potter says, causing Levy to smile brightly at the young boy. Age 12, gray. Your clothes, Kana says with a sigh. Looking down at himself, the ice mage let out a scream of surprise as he ran around the guild, picking up his clothes that somehow were scattered across the floor and even on the bar. Not too far away from the commotion, Hadrian sat on one of the stools, drinking a glass of chocolate milkshake as Makarov sat on the bar, not too far away from the young slayer. How does he always strip like that? The guild master couldn't help but wonder out loud. Snorting into his drink, Hadrian shook his head with a small, amused smile on his face. Who knows? Let's just hope that he doesn't have an exhibitionist kink when he gets older, the true devil slayer commented, causing Makarov to snort into his drink, coughing as he laughed at the response from the young boy. Oh, that would be terrible. If he subconsciously strips that fast, then I fear what he would do if he had a kink like that, the guild master says, still coughing from Hadrian's response. Letting out a chuckle of amusement, Hadrian went to drink his milkshake just as the doors slammed open. Bang! The loud noise caught everyone's attention, causing the guild to turn and see a young red-headed girl, wearing what looked to be a torn dress and an eye patch over one of her eyes. Both Makarov and Hadrian found themselves curious as the young girl made her way towards the guild master. Are you Makarov? The redhead asks, causing said guild master to raise an eyebrow. I am indeed, my dear. Can I help you with anything? The old man asks, curious. The young girl nodded her head in response. Yes, I want to join, she responds shortly. Makarov blinked in surprise and sensed the young girl's magic. After a few moments, the old man nodded his head with a smile on his face. Then all I have to say is welcome to the guild, my dear, Makarov says with a smile. The effect was immediate as everyone who heard what their guild master had said began to celebrate, causing the young girl to blink in surprise as she looked around, confusion evident in her eye. Just then, the young girl flinched as the bartender placed a hand on the young girl's shoulder, something that both Hadrian and Makarov noticed. Come, let's get your guild mark, the bartender says with a smile on her face. The redhead looked up at the bartender, then slowly nodded her head. Something happened to her. Both Hadrian and Makarov thought in unison. Time skip. Urza Scarlet. That was the name of the new member of Fairy Tale. If Hadrian were to be honest, she was cold, closed off, and didn't want to be near anyone. For the young potter, that was to be expected for him, as the curse power when actively used suppresses positive emotions, making him colder, more ruthless, and unforgiving. Even without actively using the dark power, it can have some effect on the user, making them harder to read. Or in Lilith's words, gives them a permanent resting bitch face. But as the young Slayer looked over at Urza, he noted that while she may be magically powerful, she was as closed off as a royal castle. Won't let anyone in, which means for everyone in the guild, they couldn't even get close to her. Several of the other kids tried to talk to her, hoping to get to know her. All in vain, as she either insulted them or just flat out ignored them. Having done simple quests, the young girl was able to acquire new clothes with a simple chest plate over her shirt, something that the dark-haired Slayer didn't really care about, unlike some people who had found it odd. As the young Devil Slayer was consumed by thoughts, he didn't notice as a wild gray walked up to the young redhead, only wearing boxers. "Hey, you know that it is rude to ignore everyone and sit in a corner by yourself," the young ice mage says bluntly. Broken from his thoughts, the young Devil Slayer face-palmed as he shook his head in disbelief. Seriously? She has done quests and doesn't hurt anyone. Why does it matter if she prefers to be alone? The young potter wondered. Urza looked up at Gray, an emotionless expression on her face. "It does not matter. Just leave me alone," the red-headed girl stated as she stood up. Narrowing his eyes, Gray stepped forward and grasped the young girl's arm, not noticing the sudden fear in her eye. "You don't need to be such a jerk. You ignore or insult everyone in the guild, as if you were better than everyone here. But guess what? You are not," Gray states, a scowl on his face. The young girl took a breath, hiding the fear that was once present in her eye. "Maybe not, but at least I have the decency to wear something. That's more than I can say for you, perv," Urza retorted. Gray immediately recoiled, as if he were slapped before looking down, realizing that he was in fact only in his underwear. "Ah!" The ice mage let out a scream as he ran around, looking for his clothes. Taking a deep breath to calm herself, Urza made her way towards the quest board, searching for anything of interest. Grabbing one of the quests, Urza made her way to the bar, where Hadrian sat, as the bartender cleaned one of the mugs. Placing the quest on the table, the red-headed girl watched as the bartender looked at the quest, still cleaning the mug with practiced proficiency. A frown marred the bartender's face as she looked over the quest. "Sorry, I can't authorize this without the master's say," so the bartender apologized to the young girl. Urza frowned at that as she looked at the job in question. It was a C-class quest to search and bring down a group of bandits that had been terrorizing a nearby town with an estimation of at least 10 bandits. "What's the problem?" the young girl asked the bartender with a confused gaze. "You aren't a C-class wizard yet," Hadrian spoke, just as the bartender opened her mouth to answer. Nodding in confirmation, the bartender turned to Urza. "That is right. You are an E-class going into D-class wizard. Right now, you can only do D-class quests, and that's only with the master's permission, and you definitely can't do a C-class quest without the master's say," so the bartender informs the young girl with an apologetic look. Urza let out a frustrated sigh as she looked down at the quest. "And how do I convince the master to let me do the job?" the redhead asks. If Urza were to be honest, the jobs that she had been doing for the past week were mediocre and boring. As of now, she can't grow stronger, as the most dangerous thing she ever did was fight a simple wolf, and that was because it was eating a town's livestock. Without a proper challenge, she cannot grow in skill and power, something that the young girl would not allow. She didn't want to be weak, not now or ever again. "You must take someone with you," a voice spoke out, causing Urza to turn and see the guild master, walking towards the bar with a small smile. Urza blinked in surprise as Makarov jumped onto the bar just as the bartender placed a mug of alcohol next to him. Nodding the young woman in thanks, Makarov grabbed the mug and took a sip of the drink, letting out a relaxed sigh. "Take someone with me?" Urza asked, surprised. The guild master took another sip of his drink before nodding his head in confirmation. "That is right. As you cannot go on a D-class quest without me looking over it, you definitely cannot go on a C-class quest, especially not alone or with an inexperienced wizard," Makarov informed the young girl. Urza sighed as she looked down at the quest. While the young girl wanted to grow stronger and handle tougher jobs that would help her grow stronger, the idea of taking anyone along left a bitter taste in her mouth. "And who should I take?" Urza asked, still looking down at the quest. If you want to have Gramps to let you on another C-class job anytime, soon I would suggest our dark swordsman here," a voice spoke out, causing everyone to turn to see Laxus. Grinning at the group, as he threw his arm over Hadrian's shoulder as the young Devil Slayer drank his milkshake, not even blinking at the sudden arm that was now over his shoulder. Urza blinked in surprise as the older boy grinned down at Hadrian. "Hello, Laxus. I see you just got back. How was your job?" Makarov asks with a small smile. Chuckling Laxus sat atop the bar, resting his head against the wall, crossing his arms over his chest as he looked at his grandfather. It was like taking candy from a baby. "So, I see we got a newbie, huh? Well, if you plan to take a dangerous quest above your rank, take this guy. If he finds you interesting, he might even train you," Laxus says, gesturing to the young Devil Slayer. Urza looked between Laxus and Hadrian, noticing that despite being older, Laxus seemed to respect Hadrian. "Hadrian, are you willing to go with Urza on this job?" The Fairy Tale Guild Master asks with a raised eyebrow. The resident Devil Slayer sighed as he finished his drink, looking at the newest Fairy Tale member with a critical eye. "Depends on her, doesn't it? I prefer working alone, but I can work in a team, but I need to know if Urza will be able to handle doing the job," the young Potter says, narrowing her eye at that. The young redhead turned to Makarov and nodded her head. "I will take him and do the job," Urza states firmly. Noticing the sudden change in Urza's behavior, Makarov looked at the bartender, who looked back at him. After a few moments, the woman slowly nodded her head, answering the guild master's unspoken question. "Very well. But I expect you both to come back safely," Makarov says as he pushes the quest towards the bartender, who reaches under the bar and pulls out a stamp, slamming it onto the quest sheet and leaving a mark on it. With this, all copies of the job will now signify that it has been taken by Fairy Tale, allowing for fewer people to take the job and reduce problems for all guilds around the land. Letting out a sigh, Hadrian turned around in his seat and stepped off, tightening the strap of his scabbard and looking at Urza from over his shoulder. "So, are we going or what?" the young Devil Slayer asks, noticing that the redhead had yet to move. Urza blinked in surprise but nodded her head, silently walking past Hadrian as she made her way towards the exit. Looking at Makarov, the Devil Slayer nodded his head to the guild master before turning back around and following Urza out of the guild. "What do you need to grab before we leave?" the young Potter asks, walking beside the redhead. "I'm ready to go," Urza responded shortly, eliciting a raised eyebrow from the young boy. "Very well then. Then let's head to the train station. I will pay for your ticket and my own," the true Devil Slayer informed the young girl. "I can pay for my own," Urza stated, narrowing her eye at the dark-haired boy. "I wasn't asking," Hadrian states. Back on Earth, it has now been over 8 years since the disappearance of one Hadrian Potter. Things haven't been going well for the Potter family. For both Lily and James, they were filled with regret and longing to see their eldest child, to hold him in their arms, and to never let the boy go. For Alex and Violet, the twins have been searching and trying to find a way to get their older brother back, to unite their family once more. "Is it going to work?" Violet asks, worry in her eyes as she looks at her twin brother. Beside the young girl, Alex sighed as he shrugged his shoulders. In the young boy's hand was a small broom, one typically used for babies, the same one that their older brother used before their parents had to go into hiding. "I don't know, but the best we can do is somehow track Harry's magic signature. From what I could understand, we could try to use this to track him," the young male Potter says, placing the small broom in a circle, runes written across the circle that softly pulsed with magic. "But I do know one thing. We have to try," Alex says with a firm gaze. Violet frowned, but nodded her head, knowing that doing nothing would be worse for their family. The Potter twins watched as slowly the broom began to glow while the circle turned white, magic coursing through both as it began to grow. With a deep breath, both Alex and Violet stepped into the circle, placing a hand onto the broom as they began to glow. Alex and Violet both blinked in surprise as they found themselves in a completely different place. "What the? Where are we?" Violet asks, confused. Alex opened his mouth, but shut it as he had no clue as to what was going on. "So what magic do you use?" a voice asked, causing the twins to turn, only to gape as they saw the owner of the voice. A young boy with long, messy dark hair, a sword on his back, and familiar emerald green eyes. Harry, both siblings thought in complete shock. By the young boy's side was a young girl with crimson red hair, wearing a dress and a chest plate over it. I use re-equip, the young girl answered shortly. Hadrian hummed as he crossed his arms, the both of them walking towards the train station, unaware of the twins before him. And what about you? I assume it has to do something with the sword, Urza asks, raising an eyebrow at the young boy. I used Devil Slayer magic. The sword was a gift, Hadrian answers. Harry, Violet calls out, in the hopes that the young Devil Slayer would hear her. But much to the confusion of the twins, Hadrian did not even react. Wanting to meet his brother, Alex ran stopping in front of the Devil Slayer, only to gasp in surprise as the older Potter sibling somehow walked through Alex, like he wasn't even there. Alex frowned as he looked down at himself, realizing what had happened. What happened? Violet asks, confused. We aren't actually here, Violet. We can only see what is happening here, Alex says, just as the world around them began to fade, revealing the room where they had used the spell to locate their older brother. So what now? The female Potter asks with a frown. Alex sighed as he rubbed the bridge of his nose in frustration. While we may not have actually made contact with Harry, we know he is safe and alive. Though he looks older than I thought he was, the male twin says in surprise. Violet frowned as she looked down. The young girl Tyan perked up as she remembered something. Didn't Harry say something about magic? He said he uses Devil Slayer magic. Does that have anything to do with the lady that took him? Violet asks, curious. Alex blinked in surprise before crossing his arms, his eyebrows scrunched together in thought. Yes, I think he did. That woman that stole him must have taught him magic. But why would she do that? Alex wondered. Violet sighed as she shrugged her shoulders. I don't know, but maybe we should talk to the headmaster. Maybe he can help us find Harry, the younger suggested. Alex raised an eyebrow as he looked at Violet, looking at the young girl with a questioning gaze. Do you think he might be able to help us? After all, he is busy handling the school and all his positions, the young boy asks. The young girl merely shrugged her shoulders in response. It's worth a shot, isn't it? Violet asks. Alex sighed, but nodded his head in agreement. Yeah, I think it is best, the young boy responded. Looking at each other, the twins looked into each other's eyes with determination burning in them. One goal in mind, to find a way to get to their brother. Back in Earthland, the 12-year-old Potter sighed as he rubbed the bridge of his nose in frustration. Before the Devil Slayer, Urza fidgeted under the young boy's frustrated gaze. So, you're telling me that you use magic that you can't even use in a fight right now? The dark-haired boy asks, annoyed. The young redhead winced but nodded her head in confirmation. Hadrian groaned as he looked up, letting out an annoyed sigh. What made you think fighting a group of bandits without any way to actually fight them would be a good idea? The Devil Slayer asks, looking at the young girl like she was an idiot. Just get me a sword, and I will fight them, the young redhead states with determination in her eyes. Hadrian groaned and shook his head in frustration. Fine, there is a blacksmith I know who takes care of Armageddon. Maybe you can find something of use for you there, the Devil Slayer says, causing Urza to perk up as she looks at the blade on the young boy's back. Maybe I will, the young redhead thought to herself. Break, sitting atop a tree branch in the middle of the night. Hadrian stared down at a camp with a group of armed men surrounding it. The young Devil Slayer's eyes shone silver as his vision was altered, allowing him to see in the dark. A trait that all Devil Slayers shared. After all, what kind of Devil Slayer can't fight a being of darkness in the dark? No signs of a magic user. All seem to rely on swords and other sorts of melee weapons. It would be easy work to take them all out in a surprise attack, Hadrian thought to himself, slowly shifting his feet and turning around, jumping off the branch and onto another separate tree. After a few more jumps, with the campsite slowly disappearing off the distance, Hadrian landed on the ground with a thud, causing a familiar redhead to stumble back in surprise. None of the bandits seemed to use magic. We take them out with a surprise attack, take as many of them out, and take down whoever was able to gain their bearings, Hadrian states. Urza blinked in surprise but nodded her head firmly, Armageddon gripped tightly in her hands. Be careful with that blade. It was given to me by a friend, and the last thing I want is to lose it. After this, I will take you to a place to get you a sword, the young Devil Slayer states. The young girl nodded her head, a fire burning in her eyes. This is my first step to becoming stronger, the red-headed girl thought, tightening her grip around Armageddon. Break. Within the bandit camp, laughter can be heard as they celebrated another successful job, having robbed a nearby carriage. As alcohol was drunk, none of the bandits were able to react as two of their own were suddenly smashed into the ground, courtesy of a young dark-haired boy. From the trees, a young girl wearing a metal chest plate landed between the ground, a sword in hand as she slammed the pommel of the blade into the face of a bandit, following it up with a slash across the chest. The sealed power of the Armageddon causing the bandit to let out a scream of pain as he was sent flying back, crashing into a nearby tree. Bringing his fist up, Hadrian's arm was engulfed with blue fire. Hellfire Demon, Destruction Fist. The young Devil Slayer yelled as he struck a bandit in the face. Urza twisted Armageddon around her hand and swung the sword with a skilled grace belonging to a natural swordsman, taking out 3 bandits with 3 powerful slashes. Looking down at the sword in her hand, the young redhead felt a sense of protection as she held the sword, something she didn't have before. Hadrian grunted as he ducked under a stray sword as his entire body was covered in fire. Hellfire Demon, Wrath. Hadrian yelled out as he launched forward, slamming his entire body into the bandit. The bandit was sent flying from the force of the impact. Urza raised her arm high and struck a bandit with a powerful strike, sending the man falling to the ground. Hadrian looked around and crossed his arms as he looked at the many bandits laying across the ground, unconscious. Normally, the young Devil Slayer would have killed them, but he knew that it might cause some problems with Urza, the newest member of the guild. And besides, they only stole, not killed. Well, from what the reports say, the young boy thought to himself. Break cling. The sound of a bell was heard as Hadrian and Urza entered a shop. The young redhead looked around in awe as she saw weapons and armor of numerous qualities around the shop. Well, do my eyes deceive me? Hadrian Potter himself graces my shop, a voice joked, causing a small smile to grow on Hadrian's face. Anthony, how have you been? The young Devil Slayer asks, making his way towards a man. The man in question was tanned with dark blonde hair, with forest green eyes. He was wearing a blacksmith's robe that showed off his decently sized muscles with dark blue pants. So, what can I do for you today? The man asks, leaning on the countertop, a smile on his face. Without a word, Hadrian drew Armageddon and placed it onto the counter. Anthony hummed as he inspected the sword. Looks good. Could use a bit more sharpening. Seals need to be strengthened as well. You are getting stronger, the blacksmith says with a chuckle. As the blacksmith began to sharpen the sword, Urza looked around, inspecting the many weapons and armor on display. Eventually, the young girl paused as she saw something that caught her eye. A beautiful armor piece with detailed markings. But what surprised the young redhead was the bust area. It was large, one for females with large breasts. Ah, I see that has caught your attention, Anthony says, catching Urza's attention. Turning to the blacksmith, Urza watched as the man handed Hadrian his sword, who began to inspect it before nodding with an appreciative expression. Yes. Did you make it? The one-eyed girl asks, curious. Anthony shook his head in response. No. Actually, this was made by my daughter. It's impressive craftsmanship, well-made and capable of taking decent blows from both magic and weapons. Though it does need some work here and there, but it is impressive for her first proper armor piece, the man says with a smile. So, Elizabeth actually started her dream, huh? Hadrian asks, sheathing Armageddon onto his back, crossing both arms as he stood beside the blacksmith. Anthony laughed, but nodded his head in confirmation. Yep, she has always wanted to be like her daddy and learned as much as she could from me, the blacksmith says with a smile. I want one, Urza states. Anthony blinked in surprise before turning to the young girl. It would need to be custom-made. This one was meant to be for an adult female. Though my daughter certainly made it for well-endowed women, Anthony says, his eyes zeroing in on the bust area. Hadrian snorted as he shook his head with an amused smile. Doesn't matter, Urza states firmly. Anthony shrugged his shoulders before turning his head. Elizabeth, Anthony yelled out, causing Urza to wince at the volume. What? A female voice yelled out. Come here, you got a customer. The blacksmith yelled. Loud footsteps can be heard as a young girl with brown hair ran into the room, eyes wide with shock. Elizabeth was a beautiful girl around the age of 15, with hair that reached down to her shoulders and a generous bust size, somewhat similar to the armor piece that she made. What really? The young girl asks, shocked and excited. Anthony merely smiled and gestured to Urza. Meet your new customer. She wants a custom made of armor piece. You two can hash out the details, the blacksmith says with a smile. Elizabeth smiled as she turned to Urza. Well, come on then, give me the details, and I will make it, the brunette says with a smile. Urza blinked in surprise as she was suddenly pulled along by Elizabeth into the other room. Anthony chuckled while Hadrian yinwed. I will pay for the maintenance, and whatever the custom armor she buys, Hadrian says, placing 2,500 jewels onto the countertop. Don't worry, my friend, just the maintenance. I have reason to believe that your red-haired friend might become a regular, Anthony says with a chuckle. No, I will pay for both. Consider the money for the custom-made armor piece for your daughter. It will give her a drive to further improve her craft, the young devil slayer states firmly. Anthony looked down at Hadrian before letting out a chuckle, nodding his head. Very well. You are very good at convincing people, my friend. Though I do have to ask, how come you brought someone here? Aren't you more of a lone wolf type of person? Anthony asks, cocking an eyebrow. Hadrian let out a breath as he looked up at the blacksmith. I am. Though I have been requested by the guild master to help out with certain jobs with other wizards, as I am already one of the more powerful members of the guild, the young devil slayer answered, arms crossed. The blacksmith hummed in thought as he looked off to the side, inspecting the many items on display. I understand that. But why bring her here? Not that I am complaining. After all, from the looks of things, my daughter might just gain a regular if she exceeds the young girl's expectation. But it just doesn't seem like you to get involved with these types of things, Anthony says. Hadrian merely grunted in response. She is new in the guild. Comes in with practically nothing but tattered clothing with a patch over her eye. I am no idiot. Something happened to her before she arrived, and I know it wasn't good. Explains why she is so insistent on wearing that armor everywhere she goes, the young boy states. Anthony frowned, but nodded his head. Very well. How long do you think you will stay? The blacksmith asks, curious. Depends on your daughter. If she can make whatever Urza requests in a day, then I am going to spend the night at a tavern. If it's longer than I pay in advance, and head back, and Urza can come pick it up when it is ready, Hadrian states. At that moment, both Urza and Elizabeth entered, a small smile on the redhead's face. Okay, I will be able to make an armor piece for Urza. It will take at least a day and an all-nighter, but it will be done by tomorrow, Elizabeth says with a beaming smile. Hadrian nodded his head and looked over to Urza. I will get us a tavern for the night. Tomorrow we will pick up your armor, and I will pay for it, Hadrian states. Urza opened her mouth, more than likely to protest, only to pause as Hadrian raised a hand. No arguing. You are new here, and I am sure I can afford a custom armor piece, the young devil slayer states. Anthony chuckled in amusement and looked over at his daughter. How much are you charging for this? The blacksmith asks Elizabeth. Around 15,000 jewels. It will be reinforced with a tougher steel so that any blow that Urza might take will be reduced, the young brunette answers. Without a word, Hadrian steps forward, pulling out a pouch and placing 16 stacks of rolled-up currency onto the counter. An extra 1,000 for the quick job, the young devil slayer states. Elizabeth blinked in surprise while Anthony laughed in amusement. As always, Harry, you seem to think like a proper businessman, the blacksmith says with an amused grin on his face. With a nod to both father and daughter, the dark-haired boy left the shop with Urza following right behind him. Elizabeth frowned as she looked over at her father. What did you mean that he was thinking like a proper businessman? The young girl asks, confused. He paid up front while also giving you a bonus. This will encourage you to do a better job. He did the same thing with me when he came to have his sword checked when we first met, Anthony says with chuckle. The young brunette blinked in surprise as she looked over at the rolled-up jewels, all in a stack of 1,000. As the young girl looked at it, she felt a surge of pride and excitement fill her. This was her first proper job, and she saw how much she was handed. The young girl clenched her fists as determination burned in her eyes. She was going to make the armor as best as she could. The dark-haired boy had trusted her to do a good job and paid her up front with a bonus. There was no way she was going to betray that trust. Not too far away from the girl, Anthony chuckled in amusement as his daughter left to work on her first armor piece. Just like me, the father thought to himself, recalling how a young boy entered his store, his very aura screaming of power as he inspected the shop. At the time, Anthony wasn't a well-known blacksmith, but eventually, with Hadrian being a recurring customer, some wizards found themselves curious as to why such a young child kept going to that specific blacksmith. This in turn allowed Anthony to gain some more customers who found themselves purchasing and acquiring armor and weapons from his store, eventually leading him to be a well-known blacksmith and one of the most trusted among the guilds in the country. And it was all thanks to the same tactics that Hadrian had employed with his daughter. Pay up front with an extra incentive of 1,000 jewels. Maybe she will be just like me, the father thought to himself with a chuckle. Break. Hello. Will you have one room or two? A lovely young lady asks as she stood from behind a desk, looking down at the two young children who had just entered the tavern. Hadrian looked to his side, silently asking Urza what she wanted. I will pay, the young devil slayer says, surprising Urza. Oh, is there one room with 2 beds? The young girl asks, curious. The lady smiled as she looked down at a sheet with the available rooms and nodded her head in confirmation. Yes, we do. That will be 500 jewels for the night, the Lari informed the two. Wordlessly, Hadrian put his hand in his pocket, pulled out a stack of rolled-up jewels, and took it off, untying the jewels. Placing the jewels in hand, the young devil slayer wordlessly counted the jewels before giving the woman exactly half. The young lady counted the jewels and nodded her head with a smile. Follow me. Your room is number 16, she says, leading both Hadrian and Urza to a decently sized room with 2 beds on opposite ends of the room. With the door closing behind them, Hadrian took his coat off and unstrapped his sword, resting it on the stand next to his bed. Without so much as a sound, the young devil slayer laid down on his bed, placing the covers over him as he relaxed. Hey, Harry, Urza hesitantly called out. Hadrian responded, why did you pay for my stuff? It isn't normal for people to do that, the red-haired girl asks, a frown on her face. Hadrian merely grunted as he relaxed on the back. You're new here, so you don't know much about the members of the guild. But I am an A-class wizard bordering on S-class. That means that most of my jobs pay a lot, and with the fact that I don't pay rent, I have a lot of money saved up as a result. What's a few 10,000 jewels when I have several 100,000 at home? Hadrian answers, shrugging his shoulders. Urza frowned but remained silent, thinking on what the young devil slayer had said. Well, if you plan to take a dangerous quest above your rank, take this guy. If he finds you interesting, he might even train you. Lax's voice rang in the young girl's head. He is an A-class wizard bordering on S-class. Is that why Laxus respects him? Urza wondered. Seals need to be strengthened as well. You are getting stronger. Anthony's statement came into Urza's mind. Seals? Why does the sword need a seal, let alone more than one? The young girl wondered. As her mind questioned the statements of the people around her, Urza slowly felt herself drifting off, sleep beginning to overwhelm her as she slept on the soft bed. Break. Urza smiled brightly as she gazed down at her new armor. Currently heading towards the train station, Urza had picked up her custom-made armor and found it perfect in the young girl's eyes. So, Elizabeth plans to make her own business, huh? Hadrian asks, walking beside the scarlet-haired girl. Urza smiled and nodded her head in confirmation, giddy with excitement. Yep, she says she's going to call it Heart Cruise. A shop for female-only armor, clothes, and accessories, Urza says with a bright smile. Hadrian hummed in thought, but nodded his head in understanding. Sounds interesting. Maybe she will learn how to improve upon her father's work, the young devil slayer says, catching Urza's attention. What do you mean? The red-headed girl asks, curious. Hadrian snorted as he turned his head slightly to Urza. Anthony has this unique ability to fuse magic and armor together, making the wearer far more dangerous. The armor or accessory could increase their strength, speed, agility, or even the potency of their magic. Of course they are expensive as hell, but I heard they are good, the young boy says with a shrug. Urza blinked in surprise as she placed a hand on her chin, stroking it in thought. Maybe I should get myself some of these armors, the red-haired girl says to herself. A snort broke Urza from her thoughts as she looked over to see Hadrian with a small smile of amusement on his face. And what is so funny? The scarlet-haired girl asks, narrowing her eye at the dark-haired boy. If you want those pieces, you're going to have to pay a lot of money. Those types of armors don't come cheap. I think the weakest is around 150,000 jewels, and that is to receive a minor boost in speed. So if you want a really good armor or sword, find one in an ancient labyrinth, forge it yourself, or fork over millions of jewels, because trust me, really powerful magically enhanced armors and accessories don't come cheap, Hadrian states. Urza merely cocked an eyebrow, her eyes drifting towards the sword on his back. An Armageddon? I know for a fact that the sword is not a normal one, the scarlet-haired girl stated, crossing her arms over her chest. Hadrian stopped, his head turning slightly as he stared at her with narrowed eyes. My sword is not magically enhanced. I know you heard about the seals that Anthony strengthened, but they're not to power the sword. They're meant to hold my power back. When we were fighting, I saw your eyes widening at the power of your attacks and the strength behind them. That is not because the sword was enhanced. That increased strength you felt is the seals that currently hold a large portion of my magical power. The sword contains the power I hold, and seals make sure that it is not released, but the stronger I get, the more power is released, increasing the wielder's abilities until either the seals or sword break or seals are strengthened, Hadrian states. Urza's eye widens in complete shock at the Devil Slayer's statement, her eye locking on a Hadrian, noticing the dark-like cracks beginning to form in his sclera. The scarlet-haired girl gulped but nodded her head, feeling her heart race with both fear and awe. He is that powerful that he needs a seal? Urza couldn't help but wonder as Hadrian turned around and walked off, heading towards the train station. Break. It is good to see that you are back, Makarov says with a smile, as both Urza and Hadrian stand before the guildmaster. Yes, we are. The mission was complete with no complications, Hadrian answers formally. The old man cocked an eyebrow as an amused grin grew on his face. You're doing that to annoy me, aren't you? The guild master asks, causing Urza to blink in surprise as she turns to Hadrian, a questioning expression on her face. Of course, Hadrian responds as if it was the most obvious thing, knowing how annoyed the old man gets when he goes all formal on him. A tick mark grew on Makarov's head as he glared at the young Devil Slayer before him. Sometimes I wonder if I should just see how far I can throw you with how often you try to annoy me, the guild master growls, though the small grin on his face shows his amusement. Of course, but then you will have to deal with the possible damage that could be caused by my landing. With how often the rest of the guild destroyed public property, you practically thank the gods that I arrived, as I have the most control over my power, resulting in far less destruction and less bills for you to pay, the young Devil Slayer says, causing Makarov to deadpan at the dark-haired boy. I hate it when you're right, the old man grumbled, causing a smirk to grow on the Devil Slayer's face. Sighing slightly, Makarov turned to Urza and smiled at the young girl. Congratulations on coming back from your quest. I see that you have a new piece of armor. That is good. It is best that you stay safe, unlike this idiot, the old man says, gesturing to Hadrian. Last I recall, I rarely, if ever, actually get hurt, Hadrian commented, which Makarov ignored, causing chuckles to be heard from nearby members. So good job on that. Now, I am aware that you received your pay, and from the looks of things you aren't happy about it, the guild master says with a knowing look. Urza sighed, but nodded her head in confirmation. Then what is the problem, my child? Makarov asks, worry present on his face. I intended to receive half the reward and hand the other half to Harry, but he had refused and forced me to have the entire pay, Urza says, her eyes filled with guilt. Makarov merely turned to Hadrian with a raised eyebrow. The young Devil Slayer shrugged his shoulders in response to the old man's silent question. What do you want me to say? I already have a lot of money, and this was Urza's first C-class mission, and she is the newest member of the guild. 100,000 jewels isn't going to bother me, since Urza needs it more than I do, the young Devil Slayer states. But you already paid for the tickets, my armor, and our room, Urza protested. Makarov blinked in surprise before he turned to Hadrian with a sly grin on his face. Well, Harry, I didn't know you had it in ya. Making the moves already, huh? The old man asks with a pervy grin. Bang! Makarov had no time to react as a fist slammed into his face, causing him to stumble back and off the bar. Hadrian merely shook his hand as he lowered it, placing it into his pocket. "YEA just hit the master?" Urza exclaimed, wide-eyed. A chuckle was heard as Makarov pulled himself up onto the bar as he grinned at Hadrian. "Nice punch there, Harry. Though I don't think I deserve that," the guild master says, causing Urza's J to drop in shock. The bartender merely rolled her eyes in amusement, grateful that someone was willing to put Makarov in his place when he gets pervy. "You do," the young devil slayer responds, causing Makarov to deadpan at Hadrian. "If you say so," the old man grumbled, knowing that arguing with the devil slayer was a pointless endeavor as he was as stubborn as a mule. So, back on topic. "Urza, you must understand that Hadrian has done so because you are new. If you had been here for longer, then he most certainly would have taken half," Makarov says, causing Hadrian to nod his head in confirmation. "See. Anyways, due to your successful mission, you have now been promoted to a D-class wizard. That means all D-class quests are now available to you. Those C-class quests need to be approved by me," Makarov says with a stern glare. Urza nodded her head, though silently wondering why she was receiving a glare. A smile made its way onto the old man's face as he clapped his hands. "Then this calls for a celebration," Makarov said as cheers echoed through the guild hall as drinks were drunk, much to Urza's confusion. "They celebrate everything and anything." "You get used to it," Hadrian answers with a shrug as he makes his way towards the bar, dodging the now flying mugs and glass bottles as a brawl begins. "I never thought I would ever be happy again," the scarlet-haired girl thought to herself, a small smile growing on her face, only for a mug to hit her in the face.